Chapter 190. O Peng invited Monk Changgung to drink some tea, but he still asked carefully, "Master, what do you think of the following matches?" There was no joy from his victory at all. Just as Monk Changgung was about to speak, a dark and thick young monk suddenly stepped out from behind him. He clasped his palms together and bowed. "Grand Marshal Uncle, I would like to challenge the disciple who defeated junior brother Yuan Liao." Oping found it funny. Seriously, to think that he would pick a fight with such a mediocre youth. He did not say a word and looked at Monk Changgung. The old monk pondered for a moment and said, "Yuan Kong, he just finished a match. If you want to compete, you have to let him rest for a while. Don't you think so?" The dark and thick Yuan Kong stiffened his neck and said, "What's there to rest for? I don't know what evil technique he used to make junior brother Yuan Liao's acupoint sealing technique fail. He only kicked and punched once in the arena. How much strength could he use? The inner strength he used can be replenished after a short rest. Why does he need to rest?" Monk Changgung saw that Yuan Kong was so anxious that he was even doing manual labor. He shouted, "Yuan Kong, what are you talking about? How does your master usually teach you? A Buddhist disciple should have the rules of a Buddhist disciple. Don't talk nonsense." When Yuan Kong heard this, he immediately said, "This disciple knows his mistake." However, he just stood there and did not return. Yuan Kong's evil technique made O Peng's heart skip a beat. When Yuan Liao's acupoint was sealed, he was talking to Monk Changgung and did not see it clearly. He only thought that the young monk had made a mistake and failed to seal Zhang Xiaohua's acupoint. Now that he thought about it carefully, there was still something to ponder. Yuan Liao was an outstanding disciple of the Dalan Temple's new generation. His acupoint sealing technique looked abnormally experienced. He must have practiced it for a long time. Zhang Xiaohua was standing still when he was struck. There was no reason for him to make a mistake, but why did he fail? This was truly a problem. O Peng glanced at Sky Origin from the corner of his eyes and thought to himself, "This bald donkey must be full of doubts, thinking that it's a trick from my Misty School. I'll ignore him for now and let him have his doubts." But when he saw the dark-skinned monk in front of him, O Peng didn't know how to answer him. From the looks of it, Monk Changgung didn't berate him to return and get him to extinguish the thought of challenging Zhang Xiaohua. He probably had the intention of getting back some face from Yuan Kong. O Peng had a general idea of Zhang Xiaohua's standards. She had defeated Yuan Kong purely by luck. Yuan Kong had been too confident in his acupoint strikes and had let his guard down, resulting in him being kicked out of the arena. For this Sky Origin to be able to stand out, based on his age, his martial arts must be stronger than Zhang Xiaohua's. Once he went up on stage, he would definitely beat Zhang Xiaohua off the stage. How could he let Zhang Xiaohua accept the challenge? However, if he didn't let Zhang Xiaohua accept the challenge, what reason did he have? Say that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't a disciple of the Misty School. All right, the previous match didn't count. The Misty School still had to send a disciple to face Yuan Kong. Looking at the previous matches, it would be difficult for a rank 1 or even a rank 2 or rank 3 cloth robe to be a match for Yuan Kong. The Misty School's reputation would likely be tarnished. Forget it. I'll let Zhang Xiaohua come out. At most, I'll just admit defeat. After all, he wasn't a disciple of the Misty School. It would be acceptable if he lost. What O Peng didn't know was that Yuan Kong had long known that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't a disciple of the Misty School. However, he didn't know that there was something fishy about it. He didn't know if he should tell Monk Changgung about his defeat. With O Peng making up his mind, just as he was about to speak, Monk Changgung made the decision for him. He said to Sky Origin, "Take your leave for now. I'll call you again when that disciple has some rest." Then he turned to ask O Peng, "Gang leader, what do you think?" O Peng smiled and said, "Master, you're right. I was thinking the same thing." "What a joke. You've already spoken for me. What else can I say?" Immediately, Monk Changgung said, "Since the rank 1 match is over, let's have our Dalan Temple's disciple spar with your rank 2 disciple. What do you think?" Oh Pang hurriedly said, I was thinking the same thing. Just as he finished speaking, four slightly older monks walked out from behind Monk Changgung. One of them was Sky Origin. When Monk Changgung saw this, he waved his hand and said, Sky Origin, take a rest. You'll spar with that rank, one disciple later. Sky Origin clasped his hands together and said, Martial Granduncle, there's no need. It won't be too late to rest after I finish this match. Monk Changgung wanted to say more, but Sky Origin said, That disciple has already competed. If I compete again, it'll be fair. Otherwise, the people of Jianghu will laugh at our Dalan temple for using numbers to bully someone. Monk Changgung nodded and once again revealed a rare smile. He didn't say anything else. Seeing this, Openg couldn't help but frown. Only a fool would believe that the Dalan temple didn't come prepared. This competition was just a competition. Finding the adult disciples of the Dalan temple to compete in the arena was the right thing to do. But Monk Changgung brought a bunch of young monks to spar with Jianghu's low-level disciples. What kind of rules was this? Openg couldn't figure it out. Moreover, these low-level disciples of his were the real deal. There was no way to fake it. But these young monks in front of him weren't low-level disciples. Who could tell if they were low-level disciples or not? In terms of age, they were about the same, but some of them looked young. Openg wanted to ask if these young monks were really low-level disciples. But even if he had the courage, he still didn't want to offend the Dalan Temple's law enforcement elder. However, Openg thought about it again. Even if the Dalan Temple came to provoke him, they would still be righteous. They wouldn't use high-level disciples to impersonate low-level disciples. Moreover, they had a deep foundation. It was understandable that a few geniuses would emerge among the low-level disciples. Thinking of this, Openg completely extinguished the idea of inquiring. When Zhang Qingyue saw the four young monks come out again, he didn't say anything else. He brought them to the arena. The four young monks were also straightforward. They each picked one. Sky Origin chose arena number 5. Although he knew that Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't go on stage, perhaps he wanted to familiarize himself with the environment first. There was no need to talk about the 5 challenges on the stage in detail. Only one of them was a genuine third-tier cotton clothing disciple challenge. Just like the previous second-tier cotton clothing disciple challenge, the first round of challengers were all ranked higher. Their strength was naturally the best amongst the second-tier cotton clothing disciple. Their martial arts level should be above the average level of the third-tier cotton clothing disciple. As for the third-tier cotton clothing disciple challenge master, he was a disciple with a mediocre performance amongst the third-tier cotton clothing disciple. In the end, this challenge competition still ended with the challenger winning. As for the other 4 matches between the Misty School and the Dalan Temple, they were a bit tragic. The Dalan Temple's monks came prepared. They had thoroughly studied the martial arts of the Misty School. In addition, the Misty School's disciples were indeed inferior to them. These 4 challenges were all defeated. However, even if this was the case, the spectating disciples were well aware of the situation. Previously, Yuan Liao's pressure point ceiling technique had already rung an alarm bell for them. His level of martial arts against the first-level disciples was already so high, so there was no need to talk about the next one. Although Yuan Liao was kicked off the arena, it was only because he was overconfident. It had nothing to do with the level of his martial arts. This time, Zhang Chengyue didn't rush back. He just stood in a corner of the arena and calmly watched the battle. He hoped that there would be a disciple like Zhang Xiaohua who kicked the Dalan Temple's little monk off the arena. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. After Zhang Qingyue sent the 4 little monks back to the reed mat shelter, the challenges on the 5 arenas continued. Inside the reed mat shelter, Openg saw the results and naturally wasn't surprised. He took a sip of tea and said to Changgung with a smile, "The Dalan Temple's foundation is really deep. The level of these low-level disciples is much higher than my Misty School's disciples of the same age. This humble one admires them greatly." Changgung's face didn't reveal a trace of a smile as he said, "This is nothing. These low-level disciples are only the new generation of the law enforcement hall. They still have a long road ahead of them. He paused for a moment and chose his words carefully before continuing. If they can't even cross this small gap, how can they be of any use in the future? These words were very unreasonable. The expressions of the people sitting to Peng's right had already changed. However, Peng turned a deaf ear to them and said with a smile, "The Dalan Temple has such outstanding talents. Congratulations. In the future, Jianghu will naturally shine with extraordinary splendor. We look forward to it." After the two finished speaking, they looked at the arena again. The number of people challenging the third level was not as many as the first level. In other words, there were only 10 disciples. In the first round of the competition, all of them were ranked among the top and had the chance to reach the third level. However, because of the Dalan Temple's interference, only one of them passed. Under normal circumstances, the number of disciples who passed the second round would be lower than the number of disciples who passed the first round. However, today was an exception. Out of 5 disciples, 3 of them passed. As for whether they were truly at the third level or if someone had deliberately let them pass, the Misty School's disciples wouldn't pursue the matter. Peng also wouldn't pursue the matter. After the challenge was over, Peng asked Chang'eng for his opinion. At this time, there weren't many disciples behind Chang'eng who hadn't fought yet. Chang'eng pondered for a moment and said, "Sect leader, this old monk only brought my disciples to your sect to learn from each other. We don't have any intention of having a comprehensive competition. Everyone is only here to exchange martial arts. There are still a few disciples behind this old monk who haven't entered the ring yet, so there's no need for a challenge." Peng smiled and said, "Reverend, you are a guest from afar. This humble one will naturally obey your orders. How will the Reverend arrange it?" Chang'eng turned around and said, "Other than Yuan Xing, everyone who hasn't entered the arena can go." After he finished speaking, 5 people walked out from behind him. They were all monks around 16 or 17 years old. Chang'eng said to Peng, "Yuan Xing is different from the others. He will fight after he enters the arena. As for the others, Chief please make arrangements." When Peng heard this, he was obviously stunned. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at the ordinary-looking monk behind Monk Chang'eng. He muttered in his heart, "What kind of trick is this old bald donkey playing?" Zhang Qingyue received Peng's order and brought the 5 monks to the arena. However, there was a problem when selecting the disciples from the Misty School. The disciples of the Misty School began to be taught weapons from the 3rd rank onwards. The Misty School's swordsmanship was also famous in the pugilistic world, not to mention the Misty 7 swords, which was the sect's signature swordsmanship. Many of the other swordsmanship were also famous in the pugilistic world. Many of the disciples of the Misty School practiced swordsmanship. As for fist techniques, they only practiced at the 1st or 2nd rank of the pugilistic world. Only a small number of disciples who didn't have the talent to practice swordsmanship chose to practice other methods, such as staff techniques. There weren't many disciples who only practiced fist and palm techniques. In comparison, the Dalan Temple was famous for their fist, palm, and leg techniques. Their weapons were also mainly staffs. They rarely even used sabers, much less swords. Now, the 5 people standing in the arena were all barehanded. They were probably prepared to face their opponents barehanded. Since that was the case, the Misty School couldn't bring out their swords. This was because Chang'eng had made it clear that this was only an exchange of martial arts and not a battle to the death. Actually, wasn't this clearly bullying? Using one's strength against the opponent's weakness. Fortunately, the Misty School was also a large sect in the pugilistic world. Their disciples were also very outstanding. Not long after, they picked out 5 disciples of similar age who were also very skilled in martial arts. While the 5 pairs of disciples were competing in the arena, Peng didn't pay much attention to them. He occasionally glanced at Yuan Xing and secretly analyzed Chang'eng's thoughts. Chang'eng seemed to have noticed this as well. However, he didn't express anything and only watched the competition in the arena with great interest. On the arena, the 10 disciples were fighting in a group. Each of them had their own unique skills and wonderful moves. The 5 Misty School disciples attacked like a tide. The 5 Dahlin Temple monks were also like pillars. They used their profound inner energy and simple moves to firmly resist the attacks. It was a stalemate. However, as time passed, the gap between the 10 disciples slowly became apparent. The Dahlin Temple disciples' fists were still strong. Every move was made with full force and didn't seem weak. On the other hand, the Misty School disciples were obviously unable to withstand the attacks. It was obvious that their inner energy was insufficient. Most of them chose to wander. In fact, this was very normal. Since the Misty School was named Misty, it was natural for them to excel in Qigong. Every disciple would study Qigong while practicing sword techniques. In a situation where their inner energy was insufficient, they would naturally choose to use Qigong as a tactic. However, even though this lightness skill could allow him to gain the upper hand for a while, it was ultimately not the way of a king. Just from the scene alone, the ethereal sect disciples below the ring already felt a sense of helplessness rising from the bottom of their hearts. They were afraid that they would lose this match again. If the previous few matches were all challenges, it would be a competition between outstanding low-level disciples fighting for a high-level position. If they lost to the Dahlin Temple, they could still accept it. They would feel that the young disciples weren't good at martial arts and needed more time to hone their skills. However, this competition in 5 arenas was obviously another way for the Dahlin Temple to test or provoke the Misty School. In the huge Misty School, no one was able to defeat the Dahlin Temple disciples. If they lost this match, the morale of the Misty School disciples would plummet and they would be ridiculed in Jianghu. However, things didn't change according to one's will. Under the secret support of the hundreds of disciples below the arena, it didn't take long for the 5 arenas to determine the winner. Although the Misty School disciples didn't want to see this, they still lost all 5 matches. Seeing the 5 disciples dejectedly walk back into the crowd, Zhang Chenyue felt very uncomfortable. However, he didn't show any expression on his face. He was still as gentle as ever as he led the 5 arrogant Dahlin Temple monks back to the reed mat shelter. In the reed mat shelter, Peng's face was gloomy. No one would be happy about this. In his opinion, even though the Misty School wasn't prepared and hastily accepted the challenge, they should at least be able to win 1 or 2 matches. Now that they had lost all 5 matches, they had lost all face. In fact, Peng didn't have any good intentions towards monk Changgung's arrival. Changgung was the law-enforcing elder of a super sect. Be it in terms of martial arts, seniority, or connections, Peng couldn't match up to him. If Changgung humiliated him a little, Peng could have just endured it. However, he didn't expect them to lose so badly. From the beginning until now, if it wasn't for Zhang Xiaohua taking advantage of Changgung's contempt and Tang Shi taking advantage of Zhang Xiaohua's victory, his Misty School would have lost every match. For a sect, this wasn't just a matter of being slapped in the face, it also had many other implications. However, since things had come to this point, Peng could only grit his teeth and swallow his pride. He suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and squeezed out a smile. "Great Master, it seems like your esteemed temple is indeed better than my Misty School. However, in terms of nurturing the next generation of disciples, we are inferior. This humble one admires you." Monk Changgung shook his head and said, "Sect leader is too modest. Who doesn't know that the Misty School has a deep foundation? The martial arts of these disciples are not worth mentioning. Even if it was your esteemed sect's core disciples or elite disciples, any one of them would be able to defeat 10 of them." When Peng heard this, his heart trembled. He quickly smiled apologetically and said, "Great Master, you must be joking. Right now, there are many elite disciples in this square. The one in the second arena was also an elite disciple, but he was actually defeated. That's why this humble one is a bit unhappy." Monk Changgung didn't point out and continued, Sect leader O is hiding his true abilities. A while ago, the entire Jianghu witnessed the Misty School's generosity. Everyone praised sect leader O for his great talent and bold vision. You created a great situation for the Misty School, and your reputation is comparable to the Dalan Temple. This humble one heard about it, and thus had the opportunity to come to your esteemed sect to witness the new atmosphere of the Misty School. When O Peng heard this, he secretly cursed in his heart. This old bald donkey is really up to no good. He wants to see the strength of my Misty School. Sigh, it seems that my Misty School has no choice but to lose face today. Thus O Peng hurriedly said, Great Master, you flatter me. My Misty School is only a small sect. How can it be compared to the Dalan Temple, a super sect in the Jianghu? It's just the wild guesses of the ignorant children in the Jianghu. It really can't be taken seriously. Monk Changgang looked at O Peng meaningfully and said, Sect leader O, actually your Misty School and the Dalan Temple have been friends for thousands of years. Although the Misty School is declining, my Dalan Temple has never dared to look down on the Misty School. These words made O Peng's back break out in cold sweat. He repeatedly said that he didn't dare. However, Monk Changgang didn't say much about this. He immediately changed the topic and said, The next match requires Yuan Xing to go on stage. However, the match with him is a bit special. When O Peng heard this, he was puzzled and said, Special? Great Master, please explain. What is that foreshadowing? Can't anyone guess it? Please collect it, thank you. -1. Chapter 191. Changgang stroked the white, triangular beard under his chin, his eyes revealing a trace of warmth as he said, This Yuan Xing is an orphan. He grew up in a mountain village next to the Dalan Temple. 2 years ago, when he was hunting in the mountains, he was injured by a tiger and wolf and almost lost his life. Fortunately, he was saved by a monk in my temple. Later on, he became a lay disciple of the temple. I saw that he had a pure heart, so I accepted him into the law enforcement hall. O Peng smiled and said, A monk's benevolence is really not bad. Master's help will definitely be repaid in the future. Changgang continued, This child has a pure heart, which suits my temperament. I originally wanted to pass on the martial arts of the Dalan Temple to my disciples. However, he is already old and the meridians in his body have already formed. On the path of inner strength, his future is bleak. I am currently considering how to teach him inner strength. O Peng frowned and thought to himself, A pure heart, which suits your temperament. Only a ghost would believe that. However, what's the point of saying so much to me? When Changgang saw O Peng frowning, he knew that O Peng didn't understand. He continued, However, Yuan Xing is a natural martial arts talent. After staying in the law enforcement hall for 2 years, he has practiced countless fist and palm techniques. He has a lot of experience in fist and kick techniques. This time, I came to your sect to bring him along so that he can see the world. O Peng still did not understand and asked, Then what's so special about this competition? Compared to the competition just now. Before he could finish his words, O Peng suddenly understood and said, Master, you mean that we won't use inner strength and will only compete with our fists and feet? Changgang nodded and said, That's exactly what I mean. I want to ask your disciple for guidance in the area of fists and feet. Hearing this, O Peng was a little embarrassed. To be honest, which of the disciples of the Misty School in the mountains had not practiced inner strength cultivation methods? When these disciples with internal strength techniques competed, they would naturally or involuntarily use their internal strength against their opponents. This was almost a habit. If they were not allowed to use their internal strength, it would be like cutting off their arms. How could they compete? At this moment, O Peng thought of Zhang Xiaohua. This youth didn't seem to know any inner strength. However, Monk Changing had mentioned that he wanted to seek guidance from the disciples of the Misty School. If he were to push him out, Monk Changing would have something against him. Furthermore, Yuan Kong was eyeing Zhang Xiaohua covetously in the reed mat shelter. He was waiting to find Zhang Xiaohua to vent his anger for his junior brother. It wasn't appropriate to let Zhang Xiaohua out now. What should he do? Peng thought for a moment and beckoned Zhang Qingyue over. He lowered his head and said a few words. Zhang Qingyue nodded and said to Yuan Xing, "Master, please come with me." After saying that, he led Yuan Xing out of the reed mat shelter. But strangely, when Yuan Xing moved, Yuan Kong followed him out. Zhang Qingyue was somewhat puzzled, but when Zhang Qingyue leaped onto the stage, Yuan Xing, who was below the stage, grabbed Yuan Xing's armpit and pushed him onto the stage. Zhang Qingyue realized that Yuan Xing was the same as Zhang Xiaohua. He did not know Qinggong. When Yuan Xing stood still on the ring, Zhang Qingyue circulated his inner strength and told him the conditions of the competition. He specifically said that he needed disciples from the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohua was originally happy when he heard the conditions of the competition. Wasn't this a competition tailor-made for him? He was eager to give it a try, but when he heard that he needed disciples from the Misty School, he immediately withered. Although he was from the Huanxi Manor, he wasn't a disciple of the Misty School. Since Zhang Qingyue said so, he must be talking about him. In this square full of people, only he wasn't from the Misty School. Zhang Qingyue's conditions were barely satisfactory. The square full of Misty School disciples was silent. They had been cultivating inner strength for a long time. It was difficult to guarantee that they could beat this Daolin Temple monk without using their inner strength. Just when Zhang Qingyue was feeling a little awkward, a voice came from below the ring. "Disciple Zhang Xiaohu is willing to give it a try." Zhang Qingyue looked up. Of course, it was Zhang Xiaohua who was standing next to Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu volunteer himself, Zhang Qingyue frowned. He wanted to refuse, but out of all the people in the square, only Zhang Xiaohu stood out. If he didn't go up on the ring, it would disappoint him. Moreover, he had only been a disciple for less than 2 months. If he was defeated by Yuan Xing, it wouldn't be a loss of face for the Misty School. It would also be easier to explain in the Jianghu in the future. Immediately, Zhang Qingyue, who had figured out the trick, nodded and said, "Then, Marshal Nephew Zhang, please go up on the ring." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly ran towards ring number 5. Nonsense! The escalator was still there, and she hadn't had time to take it away. After Zhang Xiaohua set up the escalator, Zhang Xiaohu walked up the ring very seriously. Zhang Qingyue asked in a low voice, "Zhang Xiaohu, how many times have you practiced fist techniques? How many types do you know?" Zhang Xiaohu told him everything. Zhang Qingyue nodded and said, "I understand. You can go now. Be careful." After saying this, he walked down the ring and reported to Peng. Peng, who was in the reed mat shelter, saw Zhang Xiaohu go up on the ring. He was delighted. How could he have forgotten about this disciple? He was probably the only disciple in the Misty School who didn't know much about inner strength. Moreover, he had just entered the sect. If he lost, it would be easy to find excuses. However, he didn't know how good his fists were. He seemed to have heard someone say that his fists were pretty good. With that thought in mind, Peng looked at the disciple standing to his right. Coincidentally, when Wenhai was also looking in his direction, the master and disciple looked at each other and nodded inwardly. Not long after, Zhang Qingyue returned and whispered a few words in Peng's ear. Peng's expression rarely changed as he blurted out, "What? He only knows one." But he immediately realized that he had lost his composure. He shut his mouth and waved weakly, gesturing for Zhang Qingyue to step aside. Monk Changgung was very sensitive to the reactions of the Misty School. He had brought Yuan Xing to the Misty School for 2 reasons. First, it was to broaden his horizons. Second, it was to give the Misty School a difficult problem to see how they would deal with it. However, the Misty School didn't take the difficult problem that he had racked his brains to dig out seriously. They quickly found Yuan Xing an opponent. He was very surprised. Did the Misty School have a disciple like Yuan Xing? Or did they just find a scapegoat to deal with the problem? Monk Changgung wanted to ask, but at this time, the battle on the arena had already begun. Yuan Xing was indeed fierce. He immediately used the Dalan Temple's basic fist technique, Arhut Fist. This Arhut Fist was similar to the Arhut Fist that was circulated in the pugilistic world. Not only did it have many more moves, the moves were also much more exquisite. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua, who was watching from below the arena, even realized that there were few moves in the Arhut Fist that monk Yuan Xing used that were similar to the moves in his fist of the Big Dipper. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be astonished. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohu steadied himself and used a set of 6 directions fist technique. He was neither too fast nor too slow. It was exactly the same as Yuan Xing's Arhut Fist. Every move was not at a disadvantage. Not long after, Yuan Xing finished using his Arhut Fist. He changed his move again. He was using the Dalan Temple's Skanda Palm, which was not taught to outsiders. This Skanda Palm was a fierce fist technique in the Dalan Temple that was combined with inner strength. It was extremely powerful. Now in Yuan Xing's hands, although he didn't have any inner strength, he could still vaguely feel the fierceness of it. Yuan Xing originally thought that since he used the Dalan Temple's fist technique, Zhang Xiaohu would definitely use the Misty School's secret fist technique to fight him. However, he saw that Zhang Xiaohu was still calm and unhurried. He was still using the same set of 6 directions fist. Yuan Xing didn't know the whole story. He was slightly angered. I'm using my school's secret fist technique to fight, but you're only using the 6 directions fist that is commonly seen in the pugilistic world. Isn't this clearly looking down on me? As a result, Yuan Xing became even more determined. He constantly changed his moves, trying to force Zhang Xiaohu to change his fist technique. It must be said that Yuan Xing was favored by Monk Changgung for a reason. He was able to use the Dalan Temple's secret fist techniques and palm techniques one by one. In the beginning, he used them one by one, but later on, he was no longer limited to any one set of fist techniques. He was actually able to integrate all the Dalan Temple's fist techniques. He was able to casually use them as if they were just one move of a set of fist techniques. But even so, Yuan Xing's heart fire was even more exuberant. Although Zhang Xiaohu was on the verge of collapsing, he still did not change to the ethereal sex fist techniques. Instead, he continued to use the most common set of 6 joint fists. Isn't this clearly looking down on me? Yuan Xing was secretly angry. His hands and feet were constantly changing their moves. Like a multi-armed guanyin, he attacked Zhang Xiaohu from all directions. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohu was suffering unspeakably. The fist technique he was proficient in was the 6 directions fist. He only used the other fist techniques as a reference. If he were to use them against an opponent, they would definitely be full of flaws. He might as well just use the 6 directions fist. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohu didn't have much experience against an opponent. He didn't have many opportunities to compete. Although he was proficient in the 6 directions fist, he didn't have enough practice. Soon he was at a disadvantage. If Yuan Xing hadn't been determined to force him to use the Misty School's secret fist techniques, he might have already been knocked out of the arena by Yuan Xing. Yuan Xing's fists and feet were like a mountain pressing down on Zhang Xiaohu. It made his chest feel stuffy, and he couldn't breathe. It was just like when Zhang Xiaohua was competing a few days ago. Zhang Xiaohu felt that something in his heart was being obliterated bit by bit. Maybe failure isn't far away. Zhang Xiaohu thought to himself. His movements were somewhat sluggish. Seeing this, Yuan Xing was secretly delighted. This guy is so unreasonable. Even now, he's still looking down on me. See if I don't throw you out of the arena. Thinking of this, his eyes naturally flashed with contempt. This gaze fell into Zhang Xiaohu's eyes and was imprinted in his heart. He couldn't help but think of his own situation in the Misty School. Some disciples were disdainful, some disciples were flattering, and even Chen Chen's words, "These disciples, if it were my senior Chang'e, it would only take 2 or 3 moves." These constantly flashed in Zhang Xiaohu's mind. He couldn't help but feel unyielding. There was a voice shouting in his heart, "Don't ask where a hero comes from. Miracles come from people." Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes immediately became lively. His fists and feet were also filled with power. The obscurity of his moves became smoother and smoother. As mentioned earlier, Zhang Xiaohu was the same as Zhang Xiaohua. They both had too little fighting experience. Zhang Xiaohua's North Star Magical Fist was slowly refined in the second round of the competition. Only then did it grow in power. Zhang Xiaohu was the same. Although he was familiar with the moves of the six-joint fists, his fighting experience was not as good as his younger brother's. When Yuan Xing exchanged moves with him, the pressure he gave him became the catalyst for the growth of Zhang Xiaohu's fist technique. Zhang Xiaohu's change shocked Yuan Xing. He originally wanted to force Zhang Xiaohu to display the secret fist technique, but he didn't change. Furthermore, the flaws in his moves were exposed. Yuan Xing was about to give up his original idea and knock Zhang Xiaohu off the stage. Unexpectedly, Zhang Xiaohu's fist technique didn't change, but the fist intent within changed. It became more vigorous and aggressive. Yuan Xing knew that things weren't going well. He displayed even more fist techniques. Everyone watching below the stage only had one thought: this monk is really impressive. I'm afraid that he has learned all the fist techniques of the Dalan Temple. The disciples in the square were dazzled as they looked at Yuan Xing's endless moves. They all thought to themselves, if I were to face such an opponent, but I couldn't use my inner strength, how would I win? There might be thousands of answers, but there was one thing that they all agreed on. That was, they all believed that if they were on the stage, they would definitely be stronger than Zhang Xiaohu. He wouldn't just use the same set of 6 harmonies fist technique over and over again. Furthermore, they also believed that Zhang Xiaohu's defeat was inevitable. It was only a matter of time. Although they didn't wish for such a situation to happen, the situation in front of them was exactly that. Perhaps the people in the square all had the same thoughts. Perhaps Peng and the rest in the reed mat shed also had the same thoughts. Perhaps all the martial artists in the pugilistic world had the same thoughts. However, below the first stage, Zhang Xiaohua, who was secretly clenching his fists and had his heart in his throat, didn't think so. In his heart, he firmly believed that his second brother would definitely win. Even though he had already seen that Zhang Xiaohu's fist technique was a little weak and his morale was a little low. Although Zhang Xiaohu was still at a disadvantage, the sharp Zhang Xiaohua had already seen that little bit of willpower in Zhang Xiaohu's fist technique was rising. He also saw that little bit of unyieldingness in his moves was growing strong. However, it was also because of this that his heart was raised even higher. He was afraid that his second brother would be defeated by the monk before he mastered his fist technique. What Zhang Xiaohua saw was the spirit of the fist technique and Zhang Xiaohu's willpower. The disciples of the Misty School, on the other hand, were looking at the power of the fist technique. As time passed bit by bit, Zhang Xiaohu wasn't defeated like they had imagined. Zhang Xiaohu was like a small blade of grass. Under the heavy pressure of a huge rock, he grew bit by bit. Slowly, gradually, he unknowingly lifted the huge rock. From between the gaps of the huge rock, a tender bud emerged. At this moment, the huge rock could no longer suppress and strangle this tenacious life. At this moment, Yuan Xing felt like a huge rock. He was really regretful, but he also understood a little. He regretted that he hadn't ruthlessly attacked earlier and knocked his opponent out of the arena. He understood that he had overestimated his opponent. It seemed like his opponent really only knew one set of 6 harmonies fists. Yuan Xing was furious. I came here to ask for guidance on fist techniques from your Misty School. I first showed you all the fist techniques from the Dalan Temple one by one, but you guys only knew one set of 6 harmonies fists. Is this still the Jianghu, where it's rude to come and go? But now, whether Yuan Xing was angry, shocked, or indignant, the opponent in front of him was no longer the one who had just entered the arena. He no longer had the strength to defeat him easily. His six harmonies fists had been refined to the extreme. No matter what fist technique or palm technique he used, he could use a simple move to easily resolve it. As soon as Yuan Xing relaxed a little, he would use a simple move to find his flaw and force him to quickly change his move to make up for the flaw. The disciples of the Misty School saw that the power of Zhang Xiaohu's fist technique was getting stronger and stronger. From the beginning, when he was exhausted from defending, to now when he was able to attack and slowly turn the situation around, they couldn't help but feel hope rising from the bottom of their hearts. Once that little bit of hope was born, it spread and grew. Everyone's eyes were burning and their throats were itching. Unknowingly, someone shouted out, "Zhang Xiaohu, you can do it!" Thus, with a single shout, everyone started cheering for Zhang Xiaohu. The entire arena was filled with shouts of "Zhang Xiaohua, you can do it!" O Peng and Monk Changgang, who were in the reed mat shelter, seemed to already know the final outcome from the moment Yuan Xing and Zhang Xiaohu began their match. After all, the two of them were famous experts in the Jianghu. Once this low-level disciple made a move, they would naturally know who was stronger and who was weaker. Thus, the two of them casually chatted about the matters of the Jianghu. Monk Changgang knew his disciple well and didn't look at the arena. This was a competition that didn't use internal energy, so there wouldn't be any injuries. Naturally, he didn't have to worry. Needless to say, the disciples of the Misty School would know that they were inferior to Yuan Xing the moment they made a move. On the other hand, O Peng watched as he chatted. If it were someone else who was at a disadvantage the moment they entered the arena, he might not have watched. After all, he knew that Zhang Xiaohu only knew one set of six harmonies fists. Seeing how Yuan Xing was throwing out the Dalan Temple's fist techniques as if they were free, how could Zhang Xiaohu be a match for him? However, there was another reason why O Peng was watching so attentively. Ever since Zhang Xiaohu entered the Misty School, when Wenhai hadn't taught him any martial arts, it wasn't that he didn't do his best as a master, but that when Wenhai was truly worried. The Misty School's disciples were trained from a young age and taught martial arts. There had never been a disciple as old as Zhang Xiaohu who had entered the school. For example, Aunt Qin of Mingcui Hall had entered the Misty School and didn't seek guidance from a master. She had her own martial arts, unlike Zhang Xiaohu who had to learn from scratch. However, since when Wenhai had accepted Zhang Xiaohu as a disciple, he naturally didn't want to treat him unfairly. Therefore, after careful consideration, he sought out his master, O Peng, to ask for O Peng's permission to impart the Misty School's core inner strength mantra, Ethereal Divine Art, to Zhang Xiaohu. However, O Peng immediately rejected his request. Although Ethereal Divine Art was a cultivation technique exclusive to the direct disciples of the Misty School, and Zhang Xiaohu was qualified to cultivate it, Zhang Xiaohu hadn't gone through the formal procedures to enter the school. His martial arts aptitude was still unknown. Just as age alone was a big problem, his meridians had already formed. So how could he cultivate ethereal divine art to the realm of Desheng? Oh, Peng still hoped that when Wenhai could impart other higher-level inner strength mantras to Zhang Xiaohu. This was when Wenhai's first time accepting a disciple. He cherished this slightly older disciple and only wanted to give him a good foundation. This was why he begged O Peng again and again. Moreover, O Peng refused to agree. This resulted in Zhang Xiaohu's situation where no one cared about him, even though he had been in the school for almost 2 months. -1. Chapter 192. Actually, it wasn't that O Peng didn't want to test Zhang Xiaohu's aptitude, but as the sect leader of the ethereal sect, he was really busy with a myriad of affairs every day. How would he have the time to care about such trivial matters? He couldn't even remember the name of Zhang Xiaohua, the youth who had saved his younger sister. O Peng was also an extremely talented person, so how could he not remember a person's name? To O Peng, Zhang Xiaohua was a one-off item. Once he thanked him, he would forget about it. In the future, he wouldn't pay attention to him. So why would he bother to remember him? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu was sparring with Yuan Xing in the arena. It was fine to watch, But why didn't he pay attention to his aptitude? This was Peng's intention as the sect leader, so he paid attention to it. At first, he had the same thought as the other disciples. He felt that Zhang Xiaohu didn't have any redeeming qualities and would be knocked out of the arena soon. However, after chatting with Monk Changgung for a while, he raised his head again and couldn't help but let out an N. This was the second time he had lost his composure after Zhang Xiaohu went on stage. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua saw the changes in her second brother's fists and kicks. Since Zhang Xiaohua could see it, so could Peng. Perhaps they saw different things, but they were both able to see the change in the situation. The more Zhang Xiaohu fought, the better Peng's mood became. Looking at the fine details, Peng even had a thought. If he didn't use his inner energy, his Six Harmonies fists might not be as accurate as Zhang Xiaohu's, able to find a chance to survive amidst Yuanxing's chaotic moves. At this moment, Peng's love for talent was aroused. What was a genius? This was the most common Six Harmonies fists in the pugilistic world. Taught by the Lotus Escort Agency's ninth-rate guards, was actually able to withstand the various secret fists taught by the Dalan Temple's Law Enforcement Hall's disciples. If this spread to the pugilistic world, the Misty School's reputation would definitely shine, enough to make up for the previous shadow. If the Misty School didn't pay attention to such a genius and didn't give her more responsibilities, it would be intolerable. Thinking of this, Peng raised his head and looked at Wenwenhai. Wenwenhai also noticed his master's attention. The two of them looked at each other and nodded. Wenwenhai's eyes lit up. He knew that his master had approved of Zhang Xiaohu, and he couldn't help but feel happy from the bottom of his heart. Monk Changgung originally did not pay attention to the arena, but when he saw Peng lose his composure, he was also shocked. He quickly turned his head to look at the arena. Who was Monk Changgung? He was an expert of Peng's generation. He immediately saw the difference in Zhang Xiaohu's fist technique. He could not help but cry out in pity. If Yuanxing had attacked earlier, the competition would have ended long ago. Monk Changgung coughed and asked, "Congratulations, sect master. To think that there would be such a person in ethereal sect. To be able to research the 6 directions fist technique for so many years and persist for so long without using his inner strength. It seems like Yuanxing has underestimated the heroes of the world." Cough, cough. Peng couldn't help but laugh and explained, "This, master, I have to explain to you. This disciple of the Misty School is called Zhang Xiaohu. He is a direct disciple of our Misty School." Monk Changgung felt somewhat comforted and said, "Yes, not bad. Sect leader has good eyes. To be able to find such a talented disciple and train him for so many years, he will definitely become famous in the pugilistic world." "Oh, right. I don't seem to have heard of this disciple of sect leader Peng's expression was somewhat strange as he said, "Master, you misunderstood. This Zhang Xiaohu was taken in by my disciple Wenwenhai." Wenwenhai's disciple? Monk Changgung was stunned and said, "From what I see, Zhang Xiaohu is quite old. He isn't much younger than Wenwenhai. Could it be that Wenwenhai took him in as a disciple when he was young?" Peng smiled and said, "It's like this. Zhang Xiaohu wasn't nurtured by my Misty School since he was young. His situation is similar to that of your Misty School's disciple, Yuanxing, who entered my Misty School after he grew up." Without waiting for Peng to finish, Monk Changgung interrupted and asked, "Is that so? Then, how did Zhang Xiaohu cultivate his inner force cultivation method? Sect leader if you have any good methods, please enlighten me." Monk Changgung was also concerned about Yuanxing. When he heard that Zhang Xiaohu had also entered the sect halfway, he naturally wanted to know how he cultivated the Misty School's inner force. However, Peng smiled bitterly and said, "Master, this Zhang Xiaohu has only been in the sect for 2 months. He hasn't started cultivating his inner force yet. His situation is similar to Yuanxing's. I haven't considered this matter yet. Only been in the sect for 2 months." Monk Changgung was surprised and asked, Then how long has he been practicing martial arts? Has he never cultivated inner force before? Openg said, just now my disciple Zhang Xiaohu also told me that this Zhang Xiaohu seemed to have just started practicing martial arts last summer. His inner force cultivation method is also the most common in the martial arts world. He cultivated it for 2 months and stopped practicing after entering the Misty School. Also, to tell you the truth, this Zhang Xiaohu only knows this set of 6 harmonies fist technique. He hasn't started practicing the other fist techniques of the Misty School. What? Monk Changgung was shocked again and said, he only knows this set of fist techniques. No wonder he kept using the 6 harmonies fist in the arena. I should have thought of this long ago. Immediately, Monk Changgung wrung his hands and said, how did such a talent end up in the Misty School? Openg heard this and was very unhappy. He thought to himself, what? Why can't we find Zhang Xiaohu just because you found Yuan Xing? Why can't our Misty School find a talent? Openg smiled apologetically and said, Master, even if he's a talent, he's already an adult. If he can't cultivate his inner force, it's useless. I don't know what this youth's future path will be. Monk Changgung smiled and said, sect leader O is right. If you don't like him, then give him to our Dalan temple. He just entered the Misty School and hasn't learned anything yet. What do you think? Openg said, Master, you must be joking. Since he's already entered the Misty School, he's a student of the Misty School. When he dies, he'll be a dead person of the Misty School. How can he enter another school? Absolutely not. Monk Changgung smiled and didn't say anything else. On the arena, the battle between Yuan Xing and Zhang Xiaohu entered a new stage. Although Yuan Xing's moves were varied and dazzling, Zhang Xiaohu only used the simple 6 harmonies fist techniques. His attack and defense were good, and he didn't fall into a disadvantage at all. However, if one were to say that Zhang Xiaohu could win by attacking, it would be beyond his capabilities. However, it was impossible to let Yuan Xing defeat Zhang Xiaohu. Thereupon, the two of them fought for a while longer. That Yuan Xing showed an opening and jumped out of the ring. He put his palms together and said, after fighting for so long, I can see that you only know one set of Liu Haquan. Zhang Xiaohu withdrew his fists and legs and said with a smile, that's right. Yuan Xing nodded and said, in that case I've lost. Using so many fist techniques, I can't beat a mere 6 harmonies fist. You're better than me. Zhang Xiaohu said, thousands of fists and legs, one set of fist techniques. They're all fist techniques, and there's no difference. Since it's a competition, there's no winner, so it's not a loss. Master, what do you think? Yuan Xing's expression changed, and he said, I've been thinking too much. All right, you're Zhang Xiaohu, right? I'll remember you. Today we're tied. If there's a chance in the future, we'll compete again. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly cupped his fists and said, that's my intention. I'll also remember Master's Dharma name, Yuan Xing. I'll wait for our next meeting. After saying that, Yuan Xing jumped off the arena and returned to the reed mat shelter. Zhang Xiaohu also jumped off. The Misty School disciples cheered thunderously and applauded to welcome him. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the fervent gazes of the disciples, big and small, and his eyes were a little moist. At this moment, whether it was the disciples who thought they were virtuous and didn't want to interact with Zhang Xiaohu, or the disciples who were opportunistic and wanted to curry favor with Zhang Xiaohu, all of them had a new understanding of him. At this moment, the Misty School disciples truly treated Zhang Xiaohu as their brother from the bottom of their hearts. They didn't have the cold and distant attitude they had in the past. At this moment, the Misty School disciples truly admired their sect leader from the bottom of their hearts. She really had a discerning eye for heroes. Not to mention that Zhang Xiaohu received a hero's welcome. Monk Yuan Xing also walked back to the reed mat shelter with steady steps. Monk Changgung asked with concern, Yuan Xing, victory and defeat are common in battle. There's no need to take it to heart. Yuan Xing put his palms together and bowed. Thank you for your concern, Elder. Victory is defeat, defeat is victory. How can the matters of the world be so clearly differentiated? This time, I've learned a lot from fighting with Zhang Xiaohu from the Misty School. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Monk Changgung was very satisfied when he heard this. He waved his hand and had Yuan Xing leave. Yuan Xing had just walked back to the group of monks when Yuan Kong jumped out and called out, "Martial Granduncle, senior brother Yuan Xing, has already done one round. Shouldn't it be my turn next?" Oh Peng smiled. "Little master, you just fought a battle. Rest a bit more. This Zhang Xiaohua isn't a disciple of the Misty School. The battle just now was for him to participate in the martial arts exhibition, so he naturally had to participate. Since he has already passed, I can't make decisions for him in the following battles. No matter what, I still have to listen to Zhang Xiaohua's opinion." Monk Changgung was puzzled. Zhang Xiaohua? Why does it sound like he's a family member with Zhang Xiaohu? Why isn't he a disciple of the Misty School? How can he participate in the martial arts exhibition? Oh Peng thought to himself, your Dalan Temple is participating in the martial arts exhibition. Zhang Xiaohua is from the Huan-Shi Mountain Villa. Why can't he participate? However, he still patiently explained the reason Zhang Xiaohua was participating in the martial arts exhibition and his relationship with Zhang Xiaohu. Monk Changgung nodded as he listened. Since that's the case, Zhang Xiaohua is Zhang Xiaohu's younger brother. Presumably, his aptitude is also not ordinary. His martial arts must be good. Just now, I was in a hurry and didn't see it clearly. I really want to see it again. Moreover, he isn't a disciple of the Misty School right now, but presumably he won't be in the future. Don't you agree, sect leader O? Hearing Changgung's overbearing words, O Peng smiled bitterly. You're right. I'll go and persuade him. But O Peng changed the topic and said, Master, your disciples have already sparred with my ethereal sect's disciples. I wonder if there are any other arrangements after this competition? Monk Changgung still had that dead man's expression. He said in a neutral tone, Let's talk about it after this match. O Peng was helpless. He beckoned Zhang Qingyue over and gave him a few instructions. Then he let Zhang Qingyue bring Monk Yuan Kong back to the first arena. When the two jumped onto the arena, Zhang Qingyue also called Zhang Xiaohua up. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua climb onto the arena with a face full of confusion, Zhang Qingyue smiled and said to him, Zhang Xiaohua, I'm here on the orders of the sect leader to ask you. The match you just fought was already your last match in the martial arts exhibition. You've already won. Zhang Xiaohua said happily, Really? Is there a reward? I need to give it to you now. Zhang Qingyue shook his head. We'll talk about the reward later. I called you up for something else. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. What is it? Just say it. Zhang Qingyue pointed at Yuan Kong beside him. This is the senior brother of Yuan Liao you just defeated, young master Yuan Kong. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Master Yuan Kong. Yuan Kong also put his palms together and returned the greeting, not saying anything. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. This little bald donkey is actually not saying anything. He must have something against me. I wonder how I've offended him. Zhang Qingyue continued. This young master Yuan Kong saw that you defeated his junior brother Yuan. He's itching to spar with you again. What do you think? Sect leader O said that if you don't want to fight, you don't have to. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua secretly curled his lips, thinking. He beat up the younger one and brought out the older one. The older one didn't come out, but the older one came out. Looks like he wants to take revenge and regain his face. Yuan Liao is already so powerful, so this senior brother of his must be even more incredible. I'm probably not his match. If it's still a draw, I'll have a chance. But sect leader O said that if I don't want to fight, I don't have to. Why should I find this awkward? Just as he was about to refuse, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind, causing him to exclaim, That's not right. If I don't have to fight, Zhang Qingyue wouldn't have brought this little bald donkey up to the stage. Besides, he even specially said sect leader O's words. He must be being sarcastic. Alas, I heard everyone talking about this Dahlin temple being a big sect that Misty School can't afford to offend. Sect leader probably can't refuse, so he let me come up. If I refuse, won't I ruin sect leader O's face? After he finished thinking, Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Martial Uncle Zhang, I'm willing to fight with this young master. Zhang Chengyue was overjoyed when he heard this. He had received Peng's order to persuade Zhang Xiaohua to participate in the competition, but he couldn't say it so bluntly in front of her. If Zhang Xiaohua really didn't understand and directly refused, it would be difficult for him. Now that he saw Zhang Xiaohua was very tactful and didn't need to say too much nonsense, he exhorted, Zhang Xiaohua, this young master Yuan Kong is very powerful. He already won a match just now. You must have seen it too, so you must be more careful in a while. Once he finished speaking, Zhang Chengyue didn't leave. He flashed and stood in a corner of the stage. When Yuan Kong saw that Zhang Xiaohua agreed to the competition, he narrowed his eyes and got into a stance, ready to fight. When Zhang Xiaohua saw his stance, she wasn't in a hurry and repeatedly waved her hand at Yuan Kong. Yuan Kong was puzzled and asked, since you've already agreed to the competition, why haven't you started? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, although I've agreed to the competition with sect leader I still have a condition. I'll only start if you agree to it. Yuan Kong frowned and said, I'm not in the mood to talk about conditions with you. Haven't you already agreed to the competition? What conditions do I need to talk about with you? Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously and said, I've agreed to the competition with you, but if you don't agree to my condition, I'll immediately jump off the stage as soon as we fight. Just treat it as if I've lost. What do you think? When Yuan Kong heard this, his face turned abnormally gloomy. He clenched his teeth and said, You're really despicable. You actually used such a trick. Zhang Xiaohua smiled shamelessly and said, Winning or losing is my business. Why do you care so much? Yuan Kong clenched his teeth and said, Then what conditions do you have? Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment before saying, It's nothing. If you lose, you have to teach me a sword technique from your Dahlin temple. For example, when she said this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know what sword technique to say. At this moment, Zhang Chengyue, who was standing to the side, said, Zhang Xiaohua, are you talking about the Dharma sword? I've often heard that the Dahlin temple's Dharma sword technique is very powerful. I'm sure you admire it as much as I do. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she immediately said, That's right. It's the Dharma sword. I've long heard that this sword technique is world-shaking. I really want to see it for myself. When Yuan Kong heard this, his face turned red with anger, and he said, You're going too far. This Dharma sword is a secret of the Dahlin temple. I haven't even learned it, so how can I teach it to you? That won't do. Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to say, Then let me see the sword manual. Yuan Kong still shook his head and refused to agree. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she pretended to jump off the arena and said, Since we can't come to an agreement, then it's my loss. You can return to the court victorious. When Yuan Kong saw this, he hurriedly shouted, Don't go down first. I'll go ask Grand Marshal Uncle first. With that, he used his qinggong and disappeared back to the reed mat shelter. When Monk Changgung heard this condition, he was also in a difficult position. The Dharma sword technique couldn't be taught to outsiders. How could he let Zhang Xiaohua cultivate it? However, if he didn't regain the Dahlin temple's reputation because of this, Monk Changgung would be unwilling. Therefore, he rolled his eyes and asked, Do you have absolute confidence in defeating him? Yuan Kong clenched his fists and said, I will definitely win. Actually, junior brother Yuan Liao can defeat him. It was just a moment of carelessness. When Monk Changgung heard this, he nodded and whispered a few words into his ear. When Yuan Kong heard this, he smiled and said, Thank you, Grand Marshal Uncle. With that said, he hurriedly returned to the arena. When Zhang Xiaohua saw him return, she happily said, How is it? Did you agree? Yuan Kong smiled and said, As you wish. However, I don't know the Dharma sword technique. You can only look at the sword manual. This sword manual is a secret of our Dahlin Temple. When we let you look at it, we took a risk. Therefore, after you finish reading it, you must not draw it out, nor can you dictate it to others, much less teach it to others. What do you think?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Of course. I just want to look at it. Why do I have to teach it to others?" Yuan Kong continued, "I'm not done yet. You can look at the Dharma sword technique, but you can only look at it once. More than half a time is not allowed. What do you think? If you can't, you can jump off the arena and we'll go our separate ways." -1. Chapter 193. I'm ashamed. 5K a day is the limit. Any more, and I won't be able to do it. If it's split into 2 chapters, each chapter is 3K. Wouldn't it be a problem of being fickle and fickle? Moreover, I've always been very lazy. If I upload once, I won't think about it. If I upload more, I might not be able to remember. The most important thing is that I'm not a full-time writer and only use my free time to write. Right now, I'm writing this message at 22:13. I have to work during the day and can only write at night. Everyone, please bear with me. Oh, right, the little girl's ticket actually brought me one. 5 yuan. I only saw it recently. Thank you. I hope you can urge me to upload one more time and gather 2 yuan. Then I can go buy a lottery ticket. Also, thank you all for reading my novel. Also, if any readers are familiar with Qi Dian's editors, please recommend them. Zhang Xiaohua said, "How can a monk bargain like this? He really doesn't have any self-restraint." Sky Origin didn't bicker with him and only asked if he agreed. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, "Isn't it just reading it once? When the time comes, I'll read it carefully. I'll take half a day to read a page. Let's see what you say then." Thus, Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be tricked. She was very angry and said loudly, "Just read it once. However, you have to let me read it myself." Sky Origin didn't suspect her and naturally agreed. Hearing Sky Origin agree, Zhang Xiaohua got into a fighting stance, but Sky Origin didn't move. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. "This little master, we've already agreed on the price. Why aren't you making a move?" Sky Origin frowned and said, "We've been talking for half a day and you're the one who wins. What should I do? But if I win, what will you do?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed mischievously. "If you win, I'll just jump down from this stage." Sky Origin shook his head and said, "That's too easy for you. It's not appropriate." When Zhang Xiaohua saw Yuan Kong dawdling, she giggled and said, "Then think about it carefully. I'll go down to eat first. Let's count this as my loss." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was about to go down again, Sky Origin hurriedly stopped her. Don't. I don't want your prize, okay?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she stopped in her tracks and said, "Monk Yina, I know you want to teach me a lesson and avenge your junior brother. I'm giving you and the Dahlin Temple face by going up on stage. Stop nagging and start fighting. I'm in a hurry." Zhang Xiaohua knew that Yuan Kong wanted to regain face for the Dahlin Temple. Moreover, he was conceited that he would definitely win against her. That was why he repeatedly waited for the highest bid. She had grasped Yuan Kong's weakness and forced him to lower his head again and again. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua also understood that she was just a farm boy from Huanshu Manor. She did not have any master. Even if she lost, there was nothing to lose. Anyway, she had already lost a lot of face. Why would she be afraid of one more time? The voices of the 2 people on the stage were not loud. When they were close enough, they could naturally hear them. They could not help but snicker in their hearts. This guy was really shameless. Oh Peng and the others who were far away were puzzled. They did not know what the 2 were talking about. However, the people in the square, including Zhang Xiaohu, did not have any hope for Zhang Xiaohua. Even if Zhang Xiaohua was a genius, how long had she been practicing martial arts? She had just happened to pass the challenge of a second-order commoner. Who was her opponent? It was someone who could easily defeat a third-order commoner. However, it was also because of this that everyone relaxed and wanted to see the farce on the stage. On the stage, Yuan Kong put his palms together and saluted. This little monk is Yuan Kong from the Dalan Temple. Please enlighten me." Zhang Xiaohua also cupped her fists and saluted. "This little one is Zhang Xiaohua from Huan Shi Manor. Please enlighten me." After saluting, the two of them got into their respective stances. With a loud shout, they quickly stepped forward and began to fight with their fists and palms. The little monk, Yuan Kong, learned from Yuan Liao's lesson. The first thing he used was the palm technique. He was best at Skanda exorcism palm. The Skanda exorcism palm was a secret martial art of the Dalan Temple. It was complemented by a set of profound inner strength mantras. The mantras were divided into 9 layers. Each layer would increase one's inner strength by several folds. It was said that when one reached the 9th layer, they would have the power to exorcise demons. There were few opponents in Jianghu. The masters of the Dalan Temple, who had reached the 9th layer of the Skanda exorcism palm, were all famous in Jianghu. Ever since Yuan Kong started cultivating, he had been practicing this set of inner strength mantras. He had already reached the 3rd layer. Among the younger generation of disciples in the Dalan Temple, he was also very famous. The Skanda exorcism palm was extremely powerful. Monk Yuan Kong also thought highly of himself. When they were fighting on the stage, he did not use it at all. Even then, he won easily. This time, it seemed that he hated Zhang Xiaohua to the core. He used his best move right from the start. In Yuan Kong's mind, his Skanda exorcism palm was not something that this country bumpkin Zhang Xiaohua could withstand. With this palm strike, wouldn't the inner strength contained in his palm strike send Zhang Xiaohua flying several zhang? If he could directly send her off the stage, it would also show that his inner strength was extraordinary. But who would have thought that when their fists and palms collided, both of them felt an astonishing amount of power from each other's hands. With a bang, Monk Yuan Kong did not move at all. Zhang Xiaohua took 3 steps back. Both of their faces were filled with shock. Soon after, they revealed expressions of joy at the same time. They once again waved their fists and palms and fought. The competition on the stage this time was different from the past. In other competitions on the stage, everyone cared about winning or losing. They racked their brains and used strategies and tactics to play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. However, for these two, one of them was much stronger than his opponent and did not have the slightest intention of underestimating his opponent. They did not hold back in their palm techniques and the circulation of their inner strength. The other did not care about winning or losing at all. There was no need to talk about strategies, so they did not use their full strength in their fists and kicks. As a result, Palipala sounds could be heard from the stage. It was actually the sound of force colliding with force. The situation was extremely explosive, and it was truly out of everyone's expectations. The battle between Zhang Xiaohu and Yuan Xing was said to have ended in a draw. This had indeed allowed the Misty School to regain some face. However, in reality, Zhang Xiaohu had been suppressed from the start and did not have much strength to retaliate. Most importantly, they did not use their inner strength in their competition. Although their moves looked good, their power was lacking. This made these hot-blooded youths, who used their inner strength all day long to bombard others, feel unsatisfied. When they said that it was a draw in the end, they were all happy. However, to be honest, there was a lack of excitement in their happiness. And now, looking at this young man who had just kicked a handsome little monk off the stage, he went on stage to challenge a dark and coarse monk who had easily defeated their own brother. Just based on this courage, they first praised him in their hearts. The happiest thing was that this brother went on stage to fight force with his opponent. This kind of fighting style immediately ignited the passion in the blood of the youths. Their eyes were bloodshot as they looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was continuously waving his fists around on the stage. They immediately felt that he was incomparably pleasing to the eye. What was this, a warrior? Calling him brother was really very considerate. Thus, someone shouted, "Brother, do your best! Brother, rise up!" The crowd below the stage all responded. The sound of "rise up" immediately reverberated through the hall. At this moment, if O Peng, the great sect leader felt astonished when he saw Zhang Xiaohu fight Yuan Xing to a draw, then he was now deeply shocked. To be honest, although Zhang Xiaohu's draw was very brilliant and unexpected, that kind of fighting style without internal energy could only show a person's aptitude. From a literary point of view, it was purely theoretical research. The theory might be strong, but it might not be feasible in practice. In other words, if Zhang Xiaohu really did cultivate internal energy, he might not be as powerful as Yuan Kong. A fist technique without internal energy was just a formality, a castle in the air. As long as it was slightly damaged by internal energy, it would definitely suffer a crushing defeat. This was also why Chang'eng specially mentioned the meaning of special when he mentioned Yuan Xing. Today was truly a day of glory for the Zhang brothers. O Peng couldn't help but secretly ask himself, one surprise after another, I wonder how many more surprises the Zhang brothers can give me? O Peng had previously heard some things about Zhang Xiaohua from his sister. For example, his arm strength was astonishing. However, for a sect leader like O Peng, who had seen countless outstanding talents, it really didn't count for much. Just Tang Shi from Young Eagle Hall alone was better than Zhang Xiaohua. Moreover, this strength was cultivated from a young age using medicinal herbs. Although Zhang Xiaohua had some strength, without a good foundation, his future progress was still limited. Therefore, O Peng had never thought highly of Zhang Xiaohua. However, in today's battle, he discovered that Zhang Xiaohua's arm strength seemed to be much greater than what was previously said. Either the rumors were wrong, or Zhang Xiaohua's arm strength had increased. Naturally, O Peng's thoughts leaned towards the former. He wasn't naive enough to believe that in just a few months, Zhang Xiaohua's arm strength could have improved greatly without the nourishment of medicinal herbs. However, even if O Peng didn't have any hopes of getting lucky in this extremely unfair competition, the contest between Zhang Xiaohua and Yuan Kong at the beginning still shocked him. He smiled and said to monk Chang'eng, "Congratulations, great master." This young master Yuan Kong's Skanda exorcism palm should be at the 3rd or 4th level. With such a high cultivation at such a young age, it won't be long before he will be a bright star blooming in Jianghu. Monk Chang'eng was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. His purpose in coming to the Misty School was to show off the strength of the disciplinary hall and fiercely show off his power to O Peng. He wanted to take revenge on the Misty School for taking down the Luo Shui gang one step ahead of them, causing the disciplinary hall's long-planned plan to go down the drain. Of course, this was only limited to the disciplinary hall's prestige. It wasn't the entire Dalan Temple's prestige that had been overturned. Otherwise, the disciples here wouldn't have only sent out low-level disciples to disturb the martial arts exhibition. It would have been an elite disciple against a core disciple. Then again, if that was the case, how would Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu have the opportunity to put on a show of individual martial arts? The monk Chang'eng accepted O Peng's flattery with ease. He replied in an indecent manner, "This disciple of your ethereal sect is not bad. Even though he doesn't know any inner strength, he was born with great strength. Coupled with this messy fist technique, he was actually able to fight Yuan Xing to a standstill. This is really unexpected. However, his fist technique is also strange. No matter how you look at it, it's awkward. Look at the moves of the Liuhe fist. They're not properly executed and are crooked. Also, that kick seems to be a technique of the Tan family. It's also similar to our Dalan Temple's peacock fanning tail. That's right, look at this move. It's very familiar and is somewhat similar to a move of the Skanda exorcism palm. What kind of fist technique is this? Chief, how did you teach this fist technique? How come I didn't know that you had this fist technique?" O Peng's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He knew about Zhang Xiaohua's jumbled fist technique and naturally thought that he had poor talent. He thought that it was just a passing remark. But now that he heard monk Chang'eng's comments, he naturally paid attention to it. He watched it carefully and didn't even hear Chang'eng's final question. When monk Chang'eng saw how rude O Peng was and how he didn't seem to have heard his question, he was slightly angered. He secretly cursed a few times and also watched the competition on the stage. Zhang Xiaohua was also lucky. If she encountered Monk Yuan Kong a few days ago, she would definitely lose after a few moves. However, this person just had a few battles a few days ago and had just refined the Big Dipper mystical fist. Now that his fighting spirit was high, he couldn't wait to meet some experts and properly hone his beloved Big Dipper mystical fist. In the time it took to eat half a meal, the two of them were evenly matched. Although it was said that they were evenly matched, there was actually a difference. Zhang Xiaohua used all her skills and didn't hold back. Of course, she didn't hold anything back either. On the other hand, Monk Yuan Kong only used the skills that he was proud of and had many other moves that he didn't use. As a matter of fact, when Monk Yuan saw that his Skanda exorcism palm didn't succeed, he pondered about other methods. Sealing acupoints. This was the first thing that came to Monk Yuan Kong's mind. It wasn't just because sealing acupoints was a profound martial art that very few low-level disciples knew. It was a sharp weapon that could be used to kill. Most importantly, if he was too far away, he would lose his front leg. If he could defeat Zhang Xiaohua with this, he would be able to redeem the Dalan Temple's lost face. Thinking of this, Monk Yuan Kong stopped his palm technique and used the Dalan Temple's martial art, winding silk grappling hand. The power of this grappling hand was mediocre, but its advantage was that the moves were short and quick. It was almost untraceable. However, Zhang Xiaohua was no longer the same as before. How could he get close to her? Last time he was too far away because he was caught off guard. If it was a real competition, how could she let him directly seal all 36 major acupoints on her body? After fighting like this for a while, Monk Yuan Kong revealed a slight opening. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. She took a step forward and sent a punch over. Unexpectedly, Monk Yuan Kong was already prepared. With a somersault in the air, he flipped over Zhang Xiaohua's head. Zhang Xiaohua raised her hand to the sky. Monk Yuan Kong's qigong was also exceptional. He had already leaped over. While he was in midair, he used his fingers to strike 3 acupoints on Zhang Xiaohua's neck. If it was any other opponent, that opponent would naturally be paralyzed on the ground and be at the mercy of others. However, Monk Yuan Kong had learned from Yuan Liao's mistake and didn't dare to trust himself too much. He still moved back, wanting to get out of the safe area as soon as possible. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua didn't collapse as he had expected. Instead, she raised her hand to strike. Immediately after, she spun around and kicked Monk Yuan Kong's 2 fingers with her left foot. Seeing this, Monk Yuan was both surprised and delighted. He was surprised that his acupoint sealing technique actually didn't hit Zhang Xiaohua. He didn't know the reason for this. Was it because his acupoints weren't sealed properly? Or did Zhang Xiaohua practice a hard qigong similar to Iron Shirt? But even if Zhang Xiaohua practiced a hard qigong, it was impossible for her to achieve great success at such a young age. How could she not be afraid of his acupoint sealing? Moreover, this brat seemed to have said that he didn't know any internal energy. Could it be that he was deliberately trying to confuse others? What made Monk Yuan happy was that when the left foot kicked over, wasn't the Yongquan acupoint under her foot placed right in front of his eyes? Wasn't it obvious that she was giving it to him? The Yongquan acupoint was a major acupoint. If it was really hit, not only would it break Zhang Xiaohua's internal energy. Oh, I forgot, this brat didn't have any internal energy at all. But at the very least, it would make him temporarily lose his ability to fight. Just as Monk Yuan was pondering the crucial question of whether or not to strike, Zhang Xiaohua's vigorous foot had already arrived in front of his face. The sole of her foot was placed right in front of Monk Yuan Kong. Monk Yuan Kong reflexively pressed his fingers together and actually used all his strength. However, reality once again exceeded Monk Yuan Kong's expectations. Although his slender fingers were filled with internal energy, they were still fingers and not fists. They met Zhang Xiaohua's foot head-on. Although the acupoint was extremely accurate, and it really was the Yongquan acupoint, Monk Yuan Kong felt as if he had struck an iron plate. A sharp pain transmitted from his fingers. Monk Yuan Kong sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly retracted his right arm. He exerted strength in his feet, and like a reed crossing a river, he floated to the side of the arena. Only then did he carefully look at his fingers. He saw that his fingers were already red and in incomparable pain. It was as if they were swollen. Zhang Xiaohua saw that Monk Yuan Kong had jumped to the side and didn't chase after him. She only felt that it was strange. Why did this dark and coarse little monk have the same problem as that fair and clean little monk? They both liked to randomly poke others with their fingers. Last time, that monk had poked her body more than 30 times before standing there in a daze, waiting for her to kick his butt. This time, this monk did it again. Not only did he poke her neck twice, he even wanted to poke her stinky feet as if he wasn't satisfied. What kind of problem was this? In her impression, the shrews of the Guozhuang house only used their fingers when they were quarreling. They only randomly poked each other's faces. But this group of monks randomly poked their bodies. Presumably, this was also a kind of improvement. No wonder the ancients said that only monks and women were difficult to raise. Presumably, this was the meaning behind it. Seeing that his acupoint sealing had failed, Monk Yuan was greatly shocked. This great shock was not only psychological, but also physical. He didn't know what kind of martial arts this Zhang Xiaohua practiced. Her entire body was like an iron plate, and she wasn't afraid of having her acupoint sealed. Perhaps when his Skanda exorcism palm reached the 9th level, he would be able to circulate his internal energy and use it to seal her acupoints. Moreover, his fingers were clearly injured. It would greatly affect his future competition. While Monk Yuan was greatly shocked, Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and said, "Little Monk Yuan Kong, your fingers are injured. Why don't you hurry and bandage them? Don't leave any sequelae. In the future, you won't be able to hold chopsticks properly. You won't even be able to hold pork belly properly." Monk Yuan was originally greatly shocked, but after hearing these words, he became furious. He shouted, "Amit Ba, Zhang Xiaohua, don't make irresponsible remarks. How can monks eat meat? We are usually vegetarians." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she stuck out her tongue. She knew that she had made a mistake. She bowed and said, "Little master, please don't blame me. I know my mistake and forgot about this. Please forgive me." Monk Yuan waved his uninjured hand and said, "Forget it, forget it." Zhang Xiaohua said, "I can't forget it. As an apology, I'll give you some time. Take care of your fingers first, then we'll compete." When Monk Yuan heard this, he smiled and said, "Many thanks, little benefactor." After saying this, he was just about to take out the Dalan Temple's secret healing ointment when he heard Zhang Xiaohua mutter in a small voice, "Pork belly really does taste good. This little monk really doesn't have the luck to eat it." When Monk Yuan heard this, he fell to the ground with a thud and nearly fainted. Fortunately, there was still some distance from the edge of the arena. Otherwise, Zhang Xiaohua would have won without a fight. At this moment, the Misty School's gang leader did not see such a wonderful farce at all. He only frowned tightly, as if he was thinking about something. -1. Chapter 194. Have you thought of it? Monk Yuan Kong took out a small box carved out of jade from his bosom. He picked out some black ointment that gave off a strong herbal smell and carefully rubbed it on his fingers. A cool feeling instantly spread from his hand, and the pain lessened slightly. Once Monk Yuan Kong put away the box, he used his inner energy on his fingers to help the medicine take effect. It did not take long for the swelling to subside. Although there was still some pain, it did not affect the rest of the competition. Monk Yuan Kong waved his arm and moved his fingers a few times before jumping back into the ring. He put his palms together and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, according to the rules of the pugilistic world, I should admit defeat after jumping out of the ring to apply medicine. However, this match concerns the reputation of my sect. This penniless monk does not dare to tarnish my sect's reputation and admit defeat so easily. Moreover, this is an arena. Being knocked out of the arena is the way to go. Moreover, you have already allowed me to heal my injuries. So let's have another match. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned when she heard that. She said, Young Master Yuan Kong, is this the legendary lotus blossoming tongue? I didn't ask you to admit defeat, so why are you saying so much? Even a dead person would probably be brought back to life by your words. Monk Yuan Kong was a little flushed, but it did not show on his dark and rough face. He did not answer. Instead, he swung his fist forward and swung his arm at Zhang Xiaohua's face. This time he did not use the silk, winding grappling hand or the skanda, subduing demon palm, but the 72 moves of the mad demon staff technique. This staff technique was supposed to use weapons, but this was a match between low-level disciples after all. The use of weapons was restricted. However, because he had the skanda subduing demon palm's inner force, Monk Yuan Kong did not mind. He used his arm as a staff. Although he did not use the power of the staff technique, it was still effective against opponents like Zhang Xiaohua, who had shallow martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua was delighted to see that she had a new martial art. She swung her fist and used the fist of the Big Dipper that had not changed in 1,000 years to fight Monk Yuan Kong again. This time, however, Sky Origin had learned his lesson. He did not use his full strength. Instead, he took advantage of the situation and borrowed the enemy's strength to make preparations for a protracted battle. This was the conclusion that Yuan Kong came to when he had the time to apply the medicine. This Zhang Xiaohua's fist technique was extraordinary. His skanda exorcism palm did not have the upper hand, and his acupoint sealing hand was even worse. However, Zhang Xiaohua did not have any internal energy. When he fought with her in the front, he only wanted to enjoy himself. But he forgot that pure physical strength could not be sustained for long. Moreover, it could not be regenerated through the use of his internal energy, like his own internal energy. If he only used the flexibility of his internal energy, he could exhaust Zhang Xiaohua's strength while he recovered his internal energy. Even if Zhang Xiaohua's arms had the strength of 10,000 jin, there would be a time when they would be exhausted. Although his internal energy would also be exhausted, he could use his internal energy to recover. In the end, he would be the winner. Therefore, Sky Origin changed his tactics. Zhang Xiaohua was not a greenhorn at this time. With Sky Origin's change of tactics, Zhang Xiaohua quickly understood his intentions. This move was not a new creation of Sky Origin. The Misty School's disciples had already used it. This was indeed Zhang Xiaohua's weakness. Moreover, the previous matches had a time limit. Zhang Xiaohua could conserve her strength before the time ran out. However, this time there was no time limit. It was impossible for Zhang Xiaohua to conserve her strength and persevere until the end. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua also changed. She no longer used the Big Dipper magical fist. Instead, she used the ethereal steps to fight Sky Origin. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua use the ethereal steps, Monk Changgang said, Sect leader, oh, who is this disciple? Why did you teach him the ethereal steps at such a young age? You really think highly of him. Oh, Peng was deep in thought about a question, but Monk Changgang's words pulled his attention back. He answered casually, What? I think highly of him? When he took a closer look at the stage, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was secretly shocked. Isn't this the second level of the ethereal steps? In just over a month's time, he has already mastered the second level of the ethereal steps. To this young man who has no foundation in martial arts, isn't this too miraculous? Moreover, this He Tianshu is also a talent. To be able to comprehend the first 2 levels of the ethereal steps in such a short period of time. I have really underestimated him in the past. Could he be the legendary talent that has been buried? Not to mention how O Peng and Monk Changgang would answer each other. The tricks that Zhang Xiaohua used on the stage were completely useless this time. Zhang Xiaohua's ethereal steps was indeed miraculous, but Monk Sky Origin immediately used the Dalan Temple's secret light body technique, a reed crossing the river. When his attacks failed a few times, he immediately used the Dalan Temple's secret light body technique, a reed crossing the river. His figure was swift and his footwork was marvelous. It was actually not inferior to the ethereal steps. As Zhang Xiaohua was using the ethereal steps, she could not use the Big Dipper magical fist at the same time. On the other hand, Sky Origin was using his light body technique and crazy devil staff at the same time. In half an incense's time, Zhang Xiaohua was actually surrounded by danger. She was almost hit a few times. If not for the fact that Zhang Xiaohua still had talent in footwork, she would have been impatient and frequently used variations that were not recorded in the ethereal steps. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that the ethereal steps could not subdue the enemy, she gave up on using it. She picked up the Big Dipper magical fist and immediately turned the situation around. Thus, even though Zhang Xiaohua saw that Monk Yuan Kong had dug a hole for himself, he was unable to avoid it. Thus, he had no choice but to walk toward it one step at a time. Fortunately, he was already prepared for failure. Thus, he was able to remain calm. Zhang Xiaohua used the Big Dipper magical fist one move after another to fight against Sky Origin's crazy devil staff. The two of them fought for a long time. It was unknown how many moves Zhang Xiaohua's Big Dipper magical fist had been used, while Sky Origin's inner strength had circulated through his meridians several times. All they knew was that Sky Origin's inner strength was severely depleted, and the recovery of his inner strength was gradually unable to keep up with the expenditure. However, Sky Origin was not worried at all because he could sense that the wind from Zhang Xiaohua's fists was becoming weaker and weaker. When their bodies came into contact, he could deeply sense her powerlessness. Sky Origin knew that in at most half an incense stick's time, Zhang Xiaohua's strength would be exhausted. As for him, his inner strength could last for at least 5 incense sticks' time. After all, Sky Origin was going to be defeated by him. Compared to Zhang Xiaohua's rapidly weakening strength, Monk Sky Origin's confidence rapidly swelled. The cries of "Rise!" below the arena became louder and louder. The smile in Monk Chonggung's eyes became more intense, and the confusion in O Peng's eyes became clearer. Gradually, that clarity turned into surprise, horror, and disbelief. Suddenly, O Peng stood up as though he had thought of something. He stared intently at Zhang Xiaohua, then turned his head to look at his eldest senior brother, Huyuni, who was sitting to his right. Boss, who seemed to have understood something as well. His face was filled with excitement and disbelief as he raised his head to look at O Peng. A scene from their childhood awakened the memories of the two of them. It was a distant past, so distant that O Peng was only a 7 or 8-year-old child who had just entered the sect. Although he had just started practicing martial arts, O Peng's outstanding talent was deeply appreciated by his master. He had separated O Peng from the other disciples of the Young Eagle Hall and let him practice martial arts with his eldest disciple, Huyuni, so that if there were any problems, he could ask his eldest senior brother to help him resolve them at any time. Back then, Huyuni was already a commoner rank 8 disciple. Huyuni still remembered that it was a full moon night. The two of them had practiced martial arts under the bright moonlight for a while before sitting down to rest. O Peng looked at the incomparably round and clear moon in the sky and could not help but ask Huyuni, eldest senior brother, "I have a question to ask you. I hope you won't laugh at me." Huyuni was very fond of this exceptionally intelligent junior brother of his. So, of course, he agreed readily. O Peng thought for a moment and asked somewhat embarrassedly, "Eldest senior brother, who do you think created the fist technique, palm technique, and inner force cultivation method that we are practicing?" Huyuni smiled and said, "Naturally, it was the founder of my Misty School and some capable and wise people who came after him." O Peng asked again, "Then didn't they learn other martial arts?" Huyuni said, "They should have learned other martial arts. Otherwise, how could someone who doesn't know martial arts create martial arts for no reason?" However, O Peng asked again, "Then who created their martial arts? And who created the martial arts in this world?" Huyuni was stunned and smiled embarrassedly. "Hee, I don't know about that. Our Misty School has been established for thousands of years. Where can I find them to ask? If you have the time, you can ask our master. Just as they were talking, a voice came from afar. Little Pung, your thoughts are very unique. When the two heard this, they immediately stood up and bowed. They saw a faint figure in the distance, walking over under the moonlight. The voice sounded very far away, but when they stood up, it was already close. When the figure landed, it was their master, the previous Misty School's sect master, Yunhui. After Huyuni and O Peng bowed, Yunhui patted O Peng's head and said with a smile, "For thousands of years, there have been countless people practicing martial arts in the Misty School, but no one has ever asked this question. For you to be able to think of this, it can be seen that you are extraordinary." O Peng blushed and muttered, "I was just happy from practicing. Only then did I think of where martial arts came from." Yunhui shook his head and said, "You can see brilliance in the details. This is the difference between you and others. Others only cultivate for the sake of cultivation. But you can think of the origin of cultivation. It's really rare and commendable." Huyuni blushed when he heard this. Yunhui looked at the deep night sky and said with infinite yearning, "The origin of martial arts in the pugilistic world is complicated and involves a lot of things. I can't tell you now. However, I can tell you the origin of fist techniques, palm techniques, and other martial arts so that you can broaden your horizons." Huyuni and O Peng's eyes lit up when they heard this. They said in unison, "Master, where did fist techniques come from? Tell us quickly." Yunhui cleared his throat and said, "According to ancient legends, in the earliest days there was no martial arts in this world, nor was there the word Jianghu. But one day, a strange man came to the foot of the mountain where Dalan Temple was located. There was a road that connected east and west at the foot of the mountain. On the side of the road, there was a towering Bodhi tree. The strange man sat cross-legged under the tree for a few days. Suddenly, he looked up to the sky and roared, attracting many people to stop. They saw that the man began to practice martial arts again and again until he practiced 81 times. This strange action attracted the attention of the bystanders. Among them, there were smart people who remembered this fist technique. From then on, there was a fist technique in this world. Ah, this is how the fist technique came about? It's actually so magical. Huyuni and O Peng couldn't help but be shocked. They quickly asked, then, "What's the name of the earliest fist technique?" Yunhui said thoughtfully, "The Great Heavenly Cycle Star Fist." "The Great Heavenly Cycle Star Fist?" The two were confused and asked, "Master, it seems that we have never heard of this fist technique." Yunhui said with a smile, "The origin of fist techniques in this world is naturally the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Fist. However, if we teach it like this, it can naturally be passed down from generation to generation. That strange man only practiced under the Bodhi tree, not by word of mouth. Others only learned it based on their own understanding and memory. Everyone learned it in bits and pieces. When it was combined, it was not right. No one could convince anyone. They all thought that their memory was the most accurate, so they formed different fist techniques and sections." O Peng thought again and asked, "Master, there are countless fist techniques and palm techniques in this world. Are they all from the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Fist?" Yunhui said, "Although the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Fist is the origin of fist techniques, it only has 360 moves. Now, there are far more fist techniques in the Jianghu. The thing that people in this world do not lack the least is intelligence. Ever since they obtained the germ of this martial art, many smart people started to use their brains and started to innovate and develop their own fist techniques. That is how the fist techniques of the Jianghu are formed." O Peng also said, thoughtfully, "In other words, no matter how many fist techniques are created, they are all born from the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Fist." Yunhui praised, "That's right. However, due to the long time, even if it was passed down orally at the beginning and later through words and pictures, It was inevitable that there would be some errors and omissions. Now, no one knows what the great heavenly cycle star fist looks like and what the moves of the whole set of fist techniques are. We only know that the moves of the whole set of fist techniques are all hidden among the most common fist techniques and palm techniques in the Jianghu. Peng asked curiously again, "Why are there no secret martial arts of each sect?" Yun Hui said, "The secret martial arts of each sect have been tempered by countless people in the long river of history and combined with their own unique internal strength, mental cultivation method. Although it was born out of the great heavenly cycle of Star's Fist, the moves are different. Naturally, they don't know the moves inside." Speaking of this, Yun Hui added, "Of course, it can't be absolutely said that there are no moves of the great heavenly cycle star fist in the secret martial arts of each sect. However, I'm afraid that no one knows what the specific moves are now." Hu Yuni also asked, "Then, Master, for so many years, has no one been able to restore the great heavenly cycle star fist?" Yun Hui replied, "It said that a long, long time ago someone tried to do this, but after all, no one knew what the specific moves were and whether the moves passed down covered these 360 moves. In fact, no one even knew if the moves that were passed down in the world were correct, so no one had ever succeeded. Thus, gradually no one mentioned it anymore. In the last 1,000 years, even fewer people knew about it. If you hadn't suddenly mentioned it today, I wouldn't have remembered it at all." Peng thought of something again and asked curiously, "Then, since no one knows about the great heavenly cycle star fist, how do you know about it?" Yun Hui said with a smile, "When I was young, I found half of an old book on your grandmaster's bookshelf. Some strange experiences were written in it, and one of them was about this. I was very curious at that time, so I read it carefully. Only then could I answer your question. If it were someone else, even the abbot of the Dalan temple, he may not be able to answer it." Peng listened and said, "Master, you're so knowledgeable. You're even better than the abbot of the Dalan temple." Yun Hui was very comfortable with this little flattery. He said, "When it comes to martial arts knowledge, the bald donkeys of the Dalan temple may not be better than me. However, it's also because of this that my martial arts cultivation is barely satisfactory. You have to work hard and strive to surpass them." After saying that, Yun Hui used the ethereal steps and left like a wisp of smoke. This inconceivable knowledge had long been deeply imprinted in Hu Yuni and Peng's minds. It was just that they had never thought of it in the past few decades. It was only at this moment that they saw Zhang Xiaohua's specious moves. Every move came from the most basic fist techniques. Every move was different from what they had seen. This attracted Peng's attention and brought out Hu Yuni's memories. Hu Yuni saw that Peng also thought of his own thoughts and was about to speak. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Monk Changgung ask in surprise, "Chief, what's wrong with you?" Peng then realized that he had been rude. He hurriedly gave Hu Yuni a look and barely suppressed his surging emotions. He sat back in his chair and pretended to be calm as he said, "It's nothing. I saw that your disciples' martial arts were so outstanding that I couldn't help but want to stand up and applaud. After I stood up, I felt that I had been rude. I was also afraid that it would affect their competition, so I stopped this time." How could Monk Changgung believe him? He looked at Hu Yuni, who had sat back down, and said with a smile, "Hero who has a telepathic connection with you. He also wanted to applaud my Dalan temple's disciple." Hu Yuni said with a smile, "That's right. Your disciple has won several rounds in a row. How can we not applaud and cheer for him?" Monk Changgung knew that there was a problem, but he couldn't pinpoint where the problem was. He could only say, "Look at that young disciple of yours. He's not bad. He hasn't been defeated until now. Congratulations. However, it's better to be careful. Don't exhaust yourself and damage your body." Peng and Hu Yuni focused their eyes. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua was already powerless to punch. His footsteps were somewhat crooked. It was as if Yuan Kong could knock him off the stage with a light tap of his finger. At this point, I can't help but say a few words. Actually, when Zhang Xiaohua had just learned the Big Dipper magical fist, I could have explained it to him. I could have said that this Zhang Xiaohua was a heavenly talent and that he didn't know anything about it. He learned this fist technique by learning the best of various schools. Although others laughed at him, it was because they had eyes but couldn't see. They didn't recognize that this was the essence of a fist technique. But if I wrote it like this, would you find it interesting? Please add it to your collection. Thank you. -1. Chapter 196. Since the bystanders knew, the people involved naturally knew even more. At this point in the competition, Sky Origin's heart was clear. Between the exchange of fists and palms, the weakness in Zhang Xiaohua's fists and the sluggishness in her footwork all indicated that Zhang Xiaohua was like a grasshopper after autumn, unable to jump much longer. Sky Origin couldn't help but have a playful heart. If he could tease her a few more times in the arena, the Dalan Temple would regain some of their lost face. Faced with Sky Origin's many boring moves, Zhang Xiaohua was also helpless. A punch landed on her body. A kick landed on her shoulder, but there was no strength. It didn't hurt or itch, so it was better to directly kick her off the arena. Zhang Xiaohua angrily moved to the edge of the arena, but Sky Origin blocked her directly, forcing her to the center of the arena. Even if Zhang Xiaohua wanted to jump off the arena herself, she couldn't do so now. Zhang Xiaohua let out a sigh from the bottom of her heart. Was this the legendary cat playing with the mouse? Sky Origin's actions directly led to boos from the audience below the arena. Everyone was also discussing. A scholar would rather be killed than be humiliated. But even if she wanted to commit suicide and go home, they wouldn't let her. This Dalan Temple wasn't too vengeful. How many laughs, how many sorrows. Everyone from the Dalan Temple was smiling as they watched everything that happened in the arena. Monk Chang'an even revealed a rare smile. His left hand stroked his grizzled white triangular beard, and he nodded repeatedly, giving off a feeling of deep my heart. Ever since Peng knew that she might have the Zhou stellar fist, he had been counting the moves of Zhang Xiaohua's fist technique. As for whether Zhang Xiaohua was defeated or exhausted, he didn't care too much. Not to mention that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't a disciple of the Misty School. Even if she lost, the Misty School wouldn't lose too much face. Besides, how much face did the Misty School have left today? If he lost it, so be it. Moreover, this was a competition between low-level disciples. There were no weapons, no lethal moves, so there was definitely no danger to his life. Why would Peng care? Like this, Sky Origin attacked fiercely a few times, but Zhang Xiaohua fought back weakly. She didn't pay attention and was even rolled on the ground by Sky Origin. Sky Origin didn't chase after her. Zhang Xiaohua stood up. She originally wanted to admit defeat, but when she saw Sky Origin's mocking gaze, she immediately shut her mouth. The competition had already come to an end. If she opened her mouth to beg for mercy, wouldn't that ruin her reputation? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua secretly encouraged herself. Then, with a loud shout, she attacked again. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua only wanted to set up a monument for herself. She didn't want any credit. But after this unintentional punch, a warm current flowed from the bottom of her left foot, flowing up along her bones. When Zhang Xiaohua felt this warm current, she couldn't help but be stunned. Then she became ecstatic. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and found the general reason for the warm current. The competition had been going on for so long, she must have just performed 7 sets of the Big Dipper magical fist. It was inevitable that the warm current would appear. Last time, during the second stage of the martial arts practice, didn't the warm current appear after she had just performed 2 sets of the Big Dipper magical fist? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua moved toward Yuan Kong while performing the Big Dipper magical fist. When she arrived in front of Yuan Kong, it was an offensive move. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's fist was already in front of Yuan Kong. Although Yuan Kong saw Zhang Xiaohua performing some moves and was very puzzled, since she was going to attack in close range, he didn't care. He thought that Zhang Xiaohua's strength had been used up, so he carelessly blocked it. But when his palm collided with Zhang Xiaohua's fist, an unparalleled force immediately came from Zhang Xiaohua's fist. Yuan Kong was shocked and immediately used his strength to resist, but he was still a bit too slow. Under the attack of Zhang Xiaohua's fist, his palm flew back and hit the bridge of his nose. In an instant, Yuan Kong's nose felt sour and tears and snot flowed down. Yuan Kong hurriedly used his other hand to wipe it away, but immediately a thought flashed through his mind. Zhang Xiaohua is too cunning. Just now he must have deliberately set up a maze, pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. How did I fall for his trick? At the same time he shouted in his heart, "Oh no, I'm already crying. How can I still see Zhang Xiaohua's moves?" Thus he hurriedly performed his best move, crossing the river on a reed, and flew all over the arena, afraid that he would be punched out of the arena by Zhang Xiaohua. At the same time that Yuan Kong flew up, Zhang Xiaohua also kicked Yuan Kong's chest. Yuan Kong flew up and dodged the attack. Zhang Xiaohua kicked empty air and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. As the ancient said, "Take your life when you're sick." If she didn't attack now, when would she? Zhang Xiaohua immediately used the Big Dipper fist and chased after Yuan Kong all over the arena. When Zhang Xiaohua caught up to him for the second time, Yuan Kong had already wiped away his tears. Although his eyes were still red like a rabbit's, he could still see clearly. He hurriedly used his palm to block, but just as he blocked, there was still a huge force. It was actually several times stronger than Zhang Xiaohua's initial strength. It was definitely not something Yuan Kong could block right now. Thus, Yuan Kong immediately somersaulted a few times and flew out, dispersing the force from his palm. Only then did he stare blankly at the familiar, yet unfamiliar Zhang Xiaohua in front of him. At this moment, Yuan Kong was very confused. Since Zhang Xiaohua had such great strength, he might not have been able to last until now if she had used it from the start. However, why did Zhang Xiaohua insist on pretending to be the weaker party? Only at the end did she give him a powerful counterattack. Could this be the legendary self-abuse? Yuan Kong shivered and hurriedly shook his head. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua attack again, Yuan Kong didn't dare to directly receive it with his palm this time. He still used his qinggong to dodge. Seeing Yuan Kong dodge again, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be furious. She thought to herself, "This warm current of mine will flow all over my body in a moment. If I want to beat you again, I won't have the strength to do so. Why did you dodge again?" However, he didn't think about how he had used the same move to achieve a record of 9 draws. Yuan Kong was just giving him a taste of his own medicine. The sudden change in the situation on the stage was too sudden. It was so sudden that even the people below the stage forgot to shout, "Rise." All of them stared with their eyes wide open and mouths agape. They looked at the unbelievable scene in front of them. It was as though a mouse that had been teased by a kitten had suddenly picked up a big stick and chased after the kitten. The entire arena was silent. There was only the sound of Zhang Xiaohua's footsteps chasing after him. By the time the Misty School disciples came to their senses and rose again, Zhang Xiaohua still hadn't caught up to Yuan Kong. Thinking about it, Yuan Kong's crossing the river on a reed was close to Zhang Xiaohua's ethereal steps. It was naturally not something that Zhang Xiaohua's Big Dipper Divine fist could catch up to. However, even so, Yuan Kong had expended quite a bit of his inner strength. And at that moment, the warm current in Zhang Xiaohua's bones had already flowed throughout her body. When the warm current in her bones disappeared, Zhang Xiaohua's exhaustion vanished without a trace. Her strength was restored to its original state. Yuan Kong, whose martial arts level was much higher than Zhang Xiaohua's, naturally acutely sensed the change in strength in Zhang Xiaohua's fist. However, this time, Yuan Kong no longer naively believed that Zhang Xiaohua's strength was only so much. Even if it was a parry or a counterattack, he didn't dare let his guard down. He had to be very careful. In fact, the two of them fought for a few more incense sticks worth of time. Zhang Xiaohua was once again exhausted and the wind from her fist weakened. Yuan Kong still didn't dare be greedy for credit, afraid that Zhang Xiaohua had dug a trap for him to jump into. Yuan Kong saw that Zhang Xiaohua was the same as last time. She looked like she was exhausted, but he didn't dare to go up. He was afraid that Zhang Xiaohua would punch him again. That strength really made him feel that he couldn't resist. After fighting for a while, Yuan Kong's own internal strength was also exhausted. Even if he used the Skanda subduing demon palm's internal strength cultivation method, he couldn't produce any more internal strength. Zhang Xiaohua, on the other hand, became even weaker. Yuan Kong couldn't help but have a thought flash through his mind. Could it be that that was a trap? Now, this Zhang Xiaohua really doesn't have any more strength? Thinking about it, no matter how many heroes practiced external martial arts in the world, they had never heard of anyone who had inexhaustible strength. Although this Zhang Xiaohua was much more resilient than he had expected, as a person who practiced internal strength cultivation method, even his internal strength couldn't withstand the exhaustion. How much strength could Zhang Xiaohua last? The more Yuan Kong thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. The thought of Zhang Xiaohua doesn't have any strength became increasingly clear in his mind. In the end, Yuan Kong gritted his teeth. In any case, he only had a little bit of internal strength left. Even if Zhang Xiaohua was still a trap, if he didn't try, he would still run out of internal strength in half an hour. He wouldn't be able to escape the fate of defeat. He might as well use his last bit of internal strength to see if Zhang Xiaohua really didn't have any strength left. Thinking of this, Yuan Kong firmly took a step forward and used his last bit of internal strength to block Zhang Xiaohua's fist. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua was also an empty shell. Yuan Kong's weak palm immediately sent Zhang Xiaohua flying back. Seeing this, Yuan Kong's heart was completely at ease. He followed a few steps forward, afraid that a long delay would lead to trouble. He wanted to completely and quickly knock Zhang Xiaohua off the stage. As for Zhang Xiaohua, she was depressed. She had fought with Yuan Kong for so long. She did a rough calculation in her heart. It was almost 7 times now. So why hadn't the warm current appeared yet? If she waited any longer, she would be knocked off the stage by Yuan Kong. At that time, it would be meaningless for the warm current to appear. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had already thrown the matter of her admitting defeat to the back of her mind. However, just as Yuan Kong was rushing to kick Zhang Xiaohua off the stage, Zhang Xiaohua's fist landed on Yuan Kong's leg. The anticipated warm current finally appeared. Zhang Xiaohua stood firmly on the stage. With Zhang Xiaohua's attack, the warm current began to flow again. Zhang Xiaohua's strength was unparalleled. Yuan Kong was about to cry. "You can't play like this, all right? If you could beat me, you could have kicked me off the stage earlier. Why did you have to show weakness again and again? Let me be full of confidence and scheme to kick you off the stage? It's fine if you pretend to be weak. I'll take it that you have a plan. I fell for it and stepped into your trap. It's fine if you quickly kick me down. But why do you have to give me a glimmer of hope? Do you want to exhaust my inner strength and see me make a fool of myself?" Thinking of how he had been like a cat playing with a mouse, he even laughed at Zhang Xiaohua's ridiculousness in his heart. Now that he thought about it, he really didn't know who was laughing at who. Instantly, Yuan Kong thought of Zhang Xiaohua's bet before the competition. There must be something shady going on. Otherwise, Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't have bet on the Dahlin Temple's secret manual. She must have planned this beforehand. With this in mind, Yuan Kong felt a sense of sorrow. A kind-hearted young monk like him had fallen into Zhang Xiaohua's demonic claws. Thinking of his junior brother Yuan Liao's tragic state of being kicked off the stage, Yuan Kong immediately had a plan. He immediately stopped his attack and shouted, "Zhang Xiaohua, stop for a moment!" Zhang Xiaohua was having a good time fighting. The warm current had yet to flow through her body. She had yet to finish enjoying herself, so she naturally didn't wish to stop. As she attacked, she said, "Don't stop. Speak as you fight. I'm listening." Yuan Kong scoffed when he heard that. He thought to himself, "I won't fall for your trick." You want to kick me off the stage? I won't let you succeed, even if I die. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua didn't plan on stopping, Yuan Kong didn't say another word. He quickly walked to the edge of the stage and jumped off the stage. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she shouted, "Young master, what are you doing? Don't jump. Listen to me." When Yuan Kong heard that, he ignored her. He thought to himself, a cat shedding crocodile tears for a mouse. You want to kick my butt? No way. When Yuan Kong stood steadily on the ground, he turned around and said proudly, I jumped down myself. You want to kick me? Don't even think about it. Zhang Xiaohua stood far away on the high stage and said in all seriousness, Young Master Yuan Kong, this is your fault. You didn't kill me several times just now because you couldn't bear to kick me off. How can I kick you? I stopped you just now because I wanted to tell you that we might as well call it a draw. When Yuan Kong heard that, he shouted, Why didn't you say so earlier? Zhang Xiaohua said with an innocent expression, Weren't you ignoring me? With a thud, Yuan Kong had long fainted off the stage. Fainting was really a good way to escape everything. Yuan Kong fainted from the rush and didn't know anything. When the group of young monks carried him back to the reed mat shelter, he slowly woke up. The disciples of the Misty School no longer cared about the feelings of others. Their passion was completely ignited. The situation on the stage rose and fell one after another. The ups and downs had long made their little hearts unable to bear it. Yuan Kong leaped into the air with a beautiful posture and an imposing aura. The sound of rising came to an abrupt end. When Yuan Kong fainted in the dust, the disciples of the Misty School suddenly came to their senses. This, our Misty School, brother one. Many people secretly pinched their cheeks to make sure that they weren't dreaming. A few people even ruthlessly slapped themselves and the people around them. The direct result was a wave of berating. When they were convinced that this was indeed happening in reality, they exploded. Was the brother on the stage still human? No, absolutely not. He was an undying cockroach. Therefore, the chants of cockroach, cockroach were mixed with the chants of rising, rising. While waiting, Zhang Xiaohua arrogantly cupped his fists to the brothers below the stage. When he heard the chants of cockroach, he staggered and narrowly avoided falling down and following in Yuan Kong's footsteps. He couldn't help but wipe the sweat from his forehead with lingering fear. He thought to himself, the brothers in this sect are really too enthusiastic. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was pacing back and forth on the stage, waving to the crowd below and almost saying, Good day, brothers or brothers. Thank you for your hard work. Zhang Chengyue floated onto the stage and walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He gently tugged at his sleeve and whispered to Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Xiaohua, don't get too carried away. The Dalan Temple's law-enforcing elder is still watching you from below. As soon as Zhang Xiaohua heard the words law-enforcing elder, the image of a bald man with a long donkey face and small triangular eyes flashed in his mind. The joy in his heart immediately disappeared, like snow melting in boiling water. His entire face was immediately replaced by a look of panic. He said, That master Uncle Zhang, did I go too far? Zhang Qingyue looked at Zhang Xiaohua's appearance and laughed in his heart. He said, Don't pretend in front of me. The Grand Sect Master is calling you over. It won't be too late to pretend to be pitiful in front of the law-enforcing elder of the Dalan Temple. Then, just as he was about to turn around, he seemed to have thought of something. He pretended to be indifferent and said, In a while the old monk will probably ask you some questions. Time is tight and I can't teach you. You should know that in your heart. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He knew that things were not good. His sister-in-law Lu Qian had said before, An ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. He didn't know whether this fist of the North Star was a jade or not, but this set of fist techniques had really ground Yuan Kong, a monk several levels higher than himself, to death. Even if it wasn't a jade, it was a jade. What should he do? In the midst of his anxiety, he suddenly saw Zhang Chengyue walking in front of him and his words. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood. If she still didn't understand such a blatant hint, How could she live up to the IQ of her Shuo Wenjie's enlightenment? There was some distance between the fighting ring and the reed mat shed. However, there were no Misty School disciples in this open space. Zhang Xiaohua didn't receive the welcome treatment. When Zhang Xiaohua followed Zhang Qingyue to the reed mat shed, she couldn't help but see the old monk sitting in the guest seat. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua quietly breathed a sigh of relief. This old monk didn't have a donkey face, nor did he have triangular eyes. Although he looked a little gloomy, he wasn't sinister. He wasn't the type that she was afraid of. Zhang Xiaohua quickly walked in front of Openg and sang a Fei Nua greeting. Zhang Xiaohua greets sect leader O. After Openg raised his hand, she saluted the Misty School's higher-ups on his right. Greetings to the elders and hall masters. The Misty School's hall masters and elders also happily waved their hands and greeted Zhang Xiaohua. After Zhang Xiaohua greeted everyone she was familiar with, Openg said, "Zhang Xiaohua, quickly come over and greet the Dalan Temple's law-enforcing elder, Great Master Changgang. He's a famous person in Jianghu. If you have the chance in the future, you must learn from the Great Master Changgang." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she immediately obediently walked in front of Monk Changgang and bowed deeply. "This little one is Zhang Xiaohua. Greetings to the Great Master Changgang." Monk Changgang stared at Zhang Xiaohua and didn't say anything for a long time. -2. Chapter 197. Zhang Xiaohua was frightened by Monk Changgang's stare. She thought to herself, "Did this monk see through me? But I don't have anything to let others see through me." Could it be that Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, "He wants to silence me because I humiliated the Dalan Temple? My goodness, what should we do now?" Just as Zhang Xiaohua was feeling uneasy, she heard Monk Changgang laugh and say, "Zhang Xiaohua, you are not bad. You are very good. Ha ha ha." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was even more puzzled. Was this monk crazy? He had consecutively knocked the 2 young monks he had brought out of the arena, yet here he was praising him. It was truly incomprehensible. However, Zhang Xiaohua misunderstood Monk Changgang. It was no wonder that Zhang Xiaohua defined Monk Changgang as a donkey with triangular eyes. It was the image of a sinister and cunning monk. In addition, Monk Changgang was not a benevolent senior monk. Naturally, he could not shake Zhang Xiaohua's preconceived notion. But no matter what, Monk Changgang was still a senior monk. Although he was vengeful and narrow-minded, after all, the flaws could not obscure the beauty. Would he really make things difficult for a teenager? Taking a step back, although Zhang Xiaohua was powerful and defeated 2 little monks who had higher cultivation than her, from Monk Changgang's point of view, Zhang Xiaohua was obviously older than Yuanli and Yuankong. It was normal for Zhang Xiaohua to defeat them. There was nothing to be proud of. On the contrary, Zhang Xiaohua's level of martial arts was average, and she did not know any internal strength cultivation method. This made him feel strange. The most important thing was that Monk Changgang's action of slapping the Misty School's face had been a complete success. If he did not give some face to the Misty School, it would seem that the Dalan Temple was not magnanimous enough. Zhang Xiaohua happened to make up for this shortcoming, and it was also in line with his wishes. Therefore, Monk Changgang had long forgotten about Zhang Xiaohua's defeat of his 2 proud disciples. However, when he said, "You are not bad, you are very good," it was not clear whether he meant Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts was good or it just happened to cater to his thoughts. Following that, Monk Changgang opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but when the words reached his mouth, he did not know what to say. Earlier, he had already heard from Yuanli that Zhang Xiaohua was not a disciple of the Misty School and claimed to be from Huanshi Mountain Manor. Monk Changgang naturally knew the relationship between Huanshi Mountain Manor and the Misty School. He wanted to ask if Zhang Xiaohua wanted to change her sect, but on second thought, if it wasn't for a little monk like Yuanli who grew up in the temple, or an orphan like Yuanxing, who would be willing to enter the Buddhist sect. Moreover, other little monks might not recognize the ethereal steps that Zhang Xiaohua used, but Monk Changgang saw it clearly. The Misty School had even imparted their own divine skills, so how could it have nothing to do with the Misty School. How could he poach a disciple of his? Furthermore, Monk Changgung was rather interested in Zhang Xiaohua's messy fist technique. He wanted to pull her to the side and ask, but from the ethereal steps to the fist technique, Monk Changgung naturally categorized it as a secret of the Misty School. How could he ask? Hence, after Monk Changgung praised her a few times, he seemed to be at a loss for words. Zhang Xiaohua was a little anxious. He thought to himself, "Don't be so humble. You keep saying nonsense. What's the use of praising me?" Furthermore, when he saw Monk Changgung shut up, he hurriedly bowed and said, "About that, master, there's something I'm not sure if I should say." When Monk Changgung heard that, he curled his lips and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, what's the matter? Feel free to speak." When Zhang Xiaohua heard that, she was overjoyed and immediately said, "Master, just now in the arena, Yuan Kong made a bet with me. He wanted to borrow your temple's Dharma sword manual for me to read. I wonder if this bet still stands?" Monk Changgung was embarrassed when he heard that. To put it bluntly, he never thought that Yuan Kong would lose to Zhang Xiaohua. He only thought that it was a joke. Furthermore, as an elder of the law enforcement hall, he did not have the authority to let others read the Dalan Temple's secret sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua's words had really hit his soft spot. When Openg saw this, he was secretly pleased. He immediately reprimanded Zhang Xiaohua. "Zhang Xiaohua, what kind of person is Great Master Changgung? Since he agreed to your bet, he will naturally honor it. Why do you have to bring it up now?" Zhang Xiaohua said innocently, "Sect leader, if I don't say it now, where will I find Master when he leaves? I can't possibly chase him all the way to the Dalan Temple." Monk Changgung's face darkened after being mocked by the two. He really wanted to agree, but how could he have the guts to do so? Therefore, after thinking for a while, he said, "Sect leader, oh, you don't have to beat around the bush anymore. This old monk was just lying. How about this? Zhang Xiaohua, this old monk cannot guarantee that you'll be able to see the Dharma sword manual. When I return to the Dalan Temple, I will definitely report to the abbot and do my best to fight for it for you. If the abbot agrees, that would be great. If he doesn't..." At this point, Monk Changgung muttered to himself. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly asked, "Then if he doesn't agree, will today's bet not count?" Monk Changgung let out a long laugh and seemed to have made up his mind. He said, "If you don't agree, even if I have to risk my reputation in life, I will let you see another sword manual from the Dalan Temple's collection. What do you think?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard that Monk Changgung was going to risk his life, she thought that he would risk his life to get the Dharma sword manual for her. However, in the end, he changed the topic and said that it was another sword manual from the Dalan Temple's collection. She couldn't help but feel discouraged. Actually, to her, any sword manual was good enough. However, after hearing Zhang Qingyue's praise and Monk Changgung's refusal, she naturally knew that this was a rare opportunity. Therefore, she set her sights on the Dharma sword. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was silent, Openg said, "Zhang Xiaohua, don't be greedy. Since the great Master Changgung showed you the Dalan Temple's collection, it must be a rare and peerless sword manual in Jianghu. A treasure among the sword manuals may not be inferior to the Dharma sword. Why are you so worried?" Zhang Xiaohua immediately beamed with joy and bowed to Monk Changgung again to express her gratitude. Monk Changgung glared at Openg and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Since Chifo has said so, I won't fool you with some inferior sword manual. Let's set the limit at 1 year. After 1 year, come to my Dalan Temple, and I will show you the sword manual. What do you think?" There was no reason for Zhang Xiaohua to be unwilling. Even if she was asked to follow, she would be willing. Naturally, she nodded her head continuously. Openg saw that Zhang Xiaohua and Monk Changgung had set a time limit of 1 year. He knew that Zhang Xiaohua's efforts were not in vain. Only then did he wave his hand and let Zhang Xiaohua leave. After Zhang Xiaohua bowed and left, Openg asked again, "Great Master Changgung, will the competition of the martial arts competition end here? Does the Great Master have any other arrangements?" Monk Changgung smiled and said, "This time I came here with the intention of strengthening the friendship between the two sects and strengthening the exchange between the two sections. Now that my disciples have exchanged pointers with your sect's disciples, it will naturally come to an end. There are no further arrangements. Let's end it here." Openg also smiled and said, "We really welcome a person like the Great Master to our Misty School. Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. The Great Master's trip to the Misty School this time is also a kind of encouragement for our Misty School. Our Misty School has also benefited greatly. I think that the Great Master's trip is inevitable. Only a wise and far-sighted person like the Great Master can make such an outstanding decision." Monk Changgung put his palms together and said, "This time, thanks to sect leader O's support and coordination from many sides, we finally achieved a perfect success and achieved the desired goal. This kind of competition and exchange pointers must be normalized in the future. This old monk suggests that when we return, we must report the results of this competition to the Great Master in charge of the Dahlin Temple and ask him to make a decision. Hopefully, there will be more opportunities for the disciples of our two sects to exchange pointers in the future." Openg clapped his hands and said, "Good idea. Friendship first, competition second. May the friendship between the Dahlin Temple and the Misty School last forever." Monk Changgung also clapped his hands and said, "That's how it should be." The two of them looked at each other and laughed heartily. When the laughter died down, Openg said, "Great Master, you must be tired from the long journey. This competition has been going on for more than half a day. I think your stomach must be empty. I have already ordered my subordinates to prepare vegetarian dishes. Great Master, please stay and have a taste." Monk Changgung muttered. Openg saw this and said, "I know that the Great Master has a high level of attainment in food and drink. I have already invited a famous vegetarian chef to cook for me. I think the food should be ready by now. I hope that the Great Master can give me some face and taste the specialties of Pingyang City." Monk Changgung listened and was very pleased. He smiled and said, "Then I shall accept your invitation. Sect leader, oh please." Openg was overjoyed and said, "I will lead the way. Great Master, please lead the way." Monk Changgung said, "Sect leader, oh please." At this point in the martial arts exhibition, there was nothing left for the Dahlin Temple to do. Those who should have won had won, and those who should not have lost had lost. The Misty School disciples still had other competitions that had yet to be carried out. However, the middle and upper management of the Misty School had accompanied the Dahlin Temple disciples to Rome. Naturally, the competitions could not be carried out and could only be carried out another day. When Zhang Xiaohua left the reed mat shelter and returned to the square, she was naturally treated like a hero. All the disciples wanted to say a few words to her and get familiar with her. Everyone knew that this fellow had brought honor to the Misty School and would definitely be appreciated by the sect leader. Her future in the Misty School would definitely be bright. If they did not build a good relationship with her now, when would they? Hence, they kept calling her junior brother and brother. Everyone had forgotten that Zhang Xiaohua was still not a disciple of the Misty School. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua really understood the situation that Zhang Xiaohu was in when he first arrived at the Misty School. Those enthusiastic faces were filled with sincerity, and there was not a trace of hypocrisy. If not for the fact that she did not know them at all, wouldn't others have thought that she was their brother who had chopped off chicken heads and burned yellow paper offerings to kowtow to them? -2. Chapter 198. Faced with the enthusiasm of the Misty School's disciples, Zhang Xiaohua could only throw away his armor and escape in a sorry state. After squeezing through the crowd and returning to Zhang Xiaohu's residence, Zhang Xiaohua was already out of breath. He couldn't help but say with lingering fear, "This was simply a battle. It was even more tiring than the battle on the stage. I would rather face a bald monk." He Tianshu, who was watching from the side, laughed and said, "Don't be so cocky. This is just a male disciple of our Misty School. If a female disciple of Ming Sui Hall was here, would you still be like this? Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and didn't say anything. Zhang Xiaohu's eyes, however, lit up. Zhang Xiaohu said today that he had tied with Yuan Xing compared to Zhang Xiaohua's great victory. It was a little inferior. However, it still brought glory to the Misty School. After all, the remaining disciples had mostly lost the competition. His great achievement would probably be announced tomorrow. However, today the news would spread to Ming Sui Hall. He wondered if some people would have a new evaluation of him after hearing it. The three of them entered the small courtyard and sat in front of the stone table. Zhang Xiaohu brewed tea. Zhang Xiaohua picked up the teacup and drank a total of 4 large cups before stopping. He let out a long sigh and looked relaxed. Zhang Xiaohu asked with concern, "Xiaohua, are you feeling tired? Can your body take it?" Zhang Xiaohua squinted his eyes and smiled. "It's okay, second brother. I feel a little tired, but it's nothing. I've never competed for such a long time before. I'm just very thirsty." Hearing this, He Tianshu laughed and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, from today onwards, no, from this morning onwards, I will have to look at you differently." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He didn't understand and asked, "Captain He, why do you have to look at me differently? Was it me who defeated the monks of the Dalan Temple?" He Tianshu said, "Yeah, you're now the hero of Misty School. If it weren't for you, the Misty School would have lost all its face today. Just thinking about it makes me wish I was 10 years younger so I could go on stage and show off my skills." Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "You're exaggerating. Others may not know how good my martial arts are, but you should know. I just happened to be at the right time. Even if I didn't go up, someone else would have succeeded." He Tianshu also shook his head and said, "Not necessarily. Maybe you guys didn't notice, but I did. The Dalan Temple sent a group of monks this time. They are obviously targeting our Misty School. What's the name of the first monk you defeated?" "It's that fair-skinned one that you kicked down." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was happy and said, "He's called Yuan. If he was older, he would look like a handsome scholar." When he stood at the edge of the stage, all he lacked was a folding fan. "Oh right, Captain He, I'm very curious. This fair-skinned monk pressed on my body dozens of times, then stood there and let me kick his butt. I'm really curious. I don't understand what's going on." He Tianshu laughed and said, "That's what I wanted to say. Although Yuan is young, he has received the teachings of the Dalan Temple. He actually learned the technique of sealing pressure points. This is an absolute trump card for low-level disciples." Sealing pressure points? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "What kind of martial arts is that? How come I don't know about it?" He Tianshu explained, "Of course you don't know. You just started practicing martial arts and haven't reached that level yet." Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up and said, "Then, Captain He, can you tell me about it now?" He Tianshu thought for a moment and said, "I'll explain it to you simply. Sealing pressure points is a very profound martial art. Right now, you haven't even cultivated your internal strength, so you can't practice it." He Tianshu drank a mouthful of tea and cleared his throat. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua and her brother and said, "When it comes to sealing pressure points, we must first talk about the pressure points of the human body. There are hundreds of pressure points on a person's body, big and small. They are spread all over the body and have a direct connection with the blood vessels and meridians. Thus, there is a martial art that condenses the internal strength into needles and pierces these pressure points. It can seal the blood vessels and meridians, causing the person to lose the ability to move or the ability to use internal strength. Do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at her second brother and said, "Captain He, I understand, but can you explain it more clearly? For example, what pressure points are there, and what is the use of each pressure point?" He Tianshu waved his hand and said, "First of all, your martial arts cultivation is still shallow. If I explain too much, you won't understand. Second of all, these things are recorded in the sect's martial arts manuals. Why do you need me to waste my breath? You can see for yourselves in the future." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and asked, then, that monk Yuan Liao hitting me dozens of times is a very powerful martial art? He Tianchu said seriously, yes, extremely powerful. Especially at such a young age, he actually hit 36 pressure points. If it was someone else, they would have already fallen to the ground. That's right, you're very strange. You're completely fine. At this point, he Tianchu pinched his chin with 2 fingers and looked at Zhang Xiaohua from head to toe with ill intentions. Zhang Xiaohua crossed her arms in front of her chest and said, Captain He, what are you doing? He Tianchu laughed sinisterly and said, I want to hit your pressure points and see what's going on. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, who knows? Maybe he hit them wrong. He Tianchu shook his head and said, that's impossible. I saw that his technique was very skillful. It's impossible for him to hit all 36 pressure points incorrectly. If he hit even one of them correctly, you would have lost. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so careless as to stand at the side of the ring and wait for you to kick him. That's right. There's also that dark and thick monk behind you. Didn't he also hit the pressure points on your neck and feet? It didn't have any effect. Instead, his finger was injured by your kick. No, I have to hit them too. See what's going on. How could Zhang Xiaohua let him really hit them? She quickly distanced herself from him and said, forget it, Captain He. I just finished a match, and I'm very tired. Let's talk about it later. That's right. You still haven't said why they targeted us. He Tianchu continued to explain, and I've digressed a bit. I reckon that the monks from the Dalan Temple have already investigated our Misty School. None of our commoner disciples below the 3rd rank are able to hit pressure points. Even the most outstanding ones have only just cultivated their internal energy to the standard. They haven't even learned the technique of hitting pressure points. Therefore, this Yuan from the Dalan Temple is an existence that can defeat our Misty School's commoner disciples. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she said enviously, Captain He, you're really amazing. Seeing that you're at Huanshu Manor every day, you actually know everything about Kitty Hawk Hall. He Tianchu's face was full of pride as he said, who am I? The leader of the Misty School. Naturally, I know more than others. Zhang Xiaohua slightly curled her lips and said, I think I just heard the leader of Kitty Hawk Hall say this. Am I also the leader of the Misty School? Her voice was very soft, but Zhang Xiaohua heard it clearly and laughed. He Tianchu didn't think much of it and continued, let's not talk about this, Yuan. There's also the dark and rough monk you defeated in the end. He's called, Zhang Xiaohua added, he's called Yuan Kong. Yes, it's that Yuan Kong. He Tianchu's face was deep in thought as he said, this little monk is even more amazing. The martial art he used on you is called the Skanda Subduing Demon Palm. It's a secret martial art of the Dalan Temple and is very famous in Jianghu. At his age, he's actually able to reach the 2nd level. He's definitely a genius among geniuses in the martial arts world. I think that in 10 years he'll be a famous expert in the Dalan Temple. Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and said, how can you tell that his martial art is at the 2nd level? This. He Tianchu was a bit hesitant. Zhang Xiaohu continued. The leader of Kitty Hawk Hall analyzed it. They have people who specialize in studying the martial arts of other sections. However, this 2nd level is just an estimate. After all, we don't have a specific martial art. Oh, Zhang Xiaohua understood a bit. He Tianchu continued. This Skanda Subduing Demon Palm is naturally more powerful than a pressure point martial art. They placed Yuan Kong here with the intention of defeating us commoners of the 5th or 6th level. At this point, He Tianchu seemed to have thought of something funny and laughed for a long time. Then he clutched his chest and looked at Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu, who didn't know what to do. He pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, this killing weapon was actually actually tired by you to the point of jumping off the stage. Ha ha ha. Hearing this analysis, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. He really didn't think so much. He only entered the 3rd stage of the martial arts exhibition to test his martial arts. He simply didn't expect to be provoked by the Dalan Temple, and by a freak combination of factors, he actually won against 2 monks who were younger than him. If it was just a win, then it was a win. But according to He Tianshu's analysis, these 2 monks were experts sent by the Dalan Temple this time. He had forcefully disrupted the wishful thinking of the Dalan Temple's law enforcement elder. Immediately, 2 words flashed in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Kill to silence. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Would that monk Changgang, who didn't look friendly, do this? How would He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohua know that Zhang Xiaohua was thinking so much? When He Tianshu had enough laughing, he said, "But then again, Zhang Xiaohua, not only are you strong, but you are also quite cunning. The more you fight, the more tired you become. You set a trap for Yuan Kong. You have to say your acting is really good. We all thought you were real, and our palms were sweating profusely for you." Zhang Xiaohua heard this and looked up at Zhang Xiaohua. He knew that Zhang Xiaohua was exhausted in the previous competition. He naturally didn't think that Zhang Xiaohua was deliberately setting a trap for Yuan Kong. However, hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu remembered that Zhang Xiaohua didn't rest like the others at that time. Instead, he practiced his set of messy boxing skills. As for how he recovered his strength, he didn't know. Anyway, after a while, Zhang Xiaohua regained his strength. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but feel a little worried. -2. Chapter 199. Zhang Xiaohua keenly sensed the worry in Zhang Xiaohu's eyes. She smiled and said to He Tianshu, "It's such a simple trick. That dark-skinned guy couldn't even see through it. He must be reciting scriptures all day long. His brain must be damaged." After saying that, she laughed. He Tianshu also echoed, maybe. Ha ha ha. Zhang Xiaohu also laughed softly. His laughter was probably different from He Tianshu's. The 3 of them chatted for a long time. The sky gradually darkened. Zhang Xiaohua changed the topic. Her eyes shone with the color of silver. She asked, "Captain He, I won back some face for your Misty School. Even if I didn't do much, I should at least do a little bit of hard work. Do you think Leader O will reward me?" "Reward?" He Tianshu was stunned. He said, "This, I really didn't think about it. It's said that the contestants with the wild card only have a ranking. There's no reward. After all, you're not a disciple of our Misty School. How can you be rewarded? The other disciples are rewarded with martial arts." Zhang Xiaohua's face was filled with disappointment as he said, "If I had known earlier, I would have jumped down from the arena myself. I worked myself to death, yet I didn't get any benefits. I even had to worry about being silenced." "Silenced?" He Tianshu was stunned. He asked in surprise, "Who?" Zhang Xiaohua said unhappily, "The Dalan Temple, the old monk Changgang. Who else?" You. He Tianshu pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "What are you thinking? Who told you that?" Zhang Xiaohua said eloquently, "That's how it's written in wuxia novels. Anyone who gets in the way and spoils other people's business will be silenced." He Tianshu smiled helplessly. "What are you talking about? How can you imagine what's written in novels? They were all there for the amusement of others. This was the Dalan Temple's law enforcement elder. What kind of status did he have? Even if today's action was premeditated, why would he put down his pride and deal with a teenager like you just because you won against 2 low-level disciples? Would he still want to mingle in the Jianghu in the future? This is impossible." "Really?" Zhang Xiaohua still didn't believe it. "Really?" He Tianshu patted his chest and said, "I guarantee it on my reputation." Seeing that her life was saved, Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed this time. She repeatedly said, "It's really good. It's really good." He didn't seem to care whether He Tianshu's reputation was worth anything or not. He Tianshu frowned and said, "But..." Zhang Xiaohua's heart tightened and she hurriedly asked, "But what? Don't tell me Monk Changgang will send someone to kill me?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "But you'll have 2 matches today. The first match is the 3rd round of the martial arts exhibition. According to the rules, there won't be any rewards. But your second match won't be a match of the martial arts exhibition. You'll be representing the Misty School in the competition against the Dahlin Temple. If nothing unexpected happens, I'm sure sect leader will remember your kindness. Maybe. Just as he said this, someone knocked on the door. The three of them looked at each other. Zhang Xiaohu asked, "Who are you looking for?" "Zhang Xiaohu isn't here. I'm cleaning for him." Hearing this strange answer, Zhang Xiaohua and He Tianqiu secretly laughed. However, the person outside didn't seem to be fooled by Zhang Xiaohu's lie. He said sternly. Zhang Xiaohu opened the door. "I'm Zhang Qingyue." "Oh my." The three of them were shocked. Zhang Xiaohua almost stuck her tongue out. The three of them hurriedly walked to the door and opened it. When they looked up, it was indeed Zhang Qingyue, the eldest disciple of the Misty School's sect leader. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly went up and bowed. "I didn't know Martial Uncle Zhang was coming. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." He Tianqiu and Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly bowed as well. Zhang Qingyue looked at the three of them and said, "It's not that you didn't go out to meet me. You didn't want to meet me at all. You even wanted to trick me." Zhang Xiaohu was so frightened that he hurriedly apologized. Zhang Qingyue changed his expression and said, "I'm just joking. You're both surnamed Zhang. 500 years ago, you were even one family. No need to be so polite. I know what happened to you, and so does the sect leader. He also knows that you're bluffing. You're not bad, very good." That's what the sect leader said. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes brimmed with tears. He repeatedly said, "Sect leader is wise, Martial Uncle Zhang is wise." Zhang Qingyue helped Zhang Xiaohu up and said, "You two brothers performed very well in the arena today." The sect leader was very happy. He just sent off the guests from the Dahlin Temple and sent me to call you over. Hurry up and come with me. The sect leader is still waiting for you in the meeting hall. Hearing that sect leader was still waiting, Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare delay. They hurriedly followed Zhang Qingyue to the meeting hall. Since there was nothing else for He Tianqiu to do, he could only return to the pharmacy alone. Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu followed Zhang Qingyue to the meeting hall. There weren't many people in the hall. Peng sat in the chair in the middle. A farmer-like figure sat in the first chair to his left. Zhang Xiaohua felt that he looked familiar. She seemed to have seen him before, but she didn't know his name. On the second chair to his right sat Zhang Xiaohu's master, Wenwenhai. The three of them entered the hall. After Zhang Qingyue saluted, he sat in front of Wenwenhai. Zhang Xiaohua followed Zhang Xiaohu and saluted the three people in the hall. Needless to say, he called out sect leader with great respect. When Zhang Xiaohua heard Zhang Xiaohu call the farmer-looking man elder Hu, she was puzzled. What kind of world was this? How could a farmer-looking man be an elder? However, he still saluted honestly and called out, "Elder Hu." When she saluted Wenwenhai, she could tell that something was different. Her greeting of heroine was exceptionally sweet. Everyone in the hall could tell the difference. They all laughed in their hearts. Naturally, there was no place for Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaohua in the meeting hall. They could only stand and talk. Peng first looked at Zhang Xiaohu. His heart was filled with joy. He said, "Zhang Xiaohu, you're very good. Really good." Although Zhang Xiaohu had heard these words from Peng before, when he heard it from Peng's mouth, it was as if all the grievances he had suffered over the past month were gushing out of his chest. He couldn't say anything. Only tears flowed down his cheeks like a river. When Wenhai watched from the side, he also felt a little sad. Peng didn't say anything else. He waited for Zhang Xiaohu to calm down before opening his mouth. "You've been in the sect for over a month, but you've been left aside. I don't need to tell you the reason. However, there's no lack of testing you. As my direct disciple, you're not only tested in martial arts, but also in the ways of the world. You're not Qingyue's disciple. You don't care about fame and fortune. In Jianghu, martial arts is the absolute right to speak. If you only relied on connections to form your own clique and manage your own little mountain, How could I be at ease letting Ahai teach you the divine martial arts of a sect? Fortunately, you've been tested. You're able to endure loneliness. This is the potential to become a martial arts expert. Peng paused for a moment. He continued, Actually, your master has been racking his brains for you. I'm also hesitating. However, your performance on the arena today was really refreshing. I admit that I've overlooked your potential and cared too much about your age. Looking at your potential, it's not much worse than that of Yuan Xing from the Dalan Temple. You might even be better. Since the Dalan Temple doesn't stick to the rules, how can we, the Misty School, stick to the rules? Only set our sights on young disciples? Hearing this, when Wenhai said, Zhang Xiaohu, why aren't you thanking big sect leader? Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly said, Thank you, big sect leader, for your help. Peng smiled. You don't have to be like this. The opportunity is right in front of you. You have to rely on yourself to grasp it. You have to rely on yourself to cultivate. Our Misty School's core internal strength cultivation method is meant for people to cultivate. If you have the potential and fate to cultivate it to Deshang, it won't only be your personal glory, it will also be our Misty School's achievement. Speaking till here, Peng sighed slightly and said, However, I also want to tell you the truth. This inner strength mental cultivation method, in our ethereal sect, we don't know how many talented people have practiced it, but only a few have been able to practice it successfully. Even for me, it was only by chance that I was able to practice it successfully. As for the reason behind it, there's no need to go into detail now. I just want to ask you, are you willing to choose this ethereal divine skill? Do you want to cultivate this core internal strength cultivation method, or do you want to choose another one? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu didn't say anything. However, Zhang Xiaohua silently cursed in her heart. She thought to herself, what's wrong with big sect leader? Just the name of this ethereal divine art alone sounds amazing. Anyone who chooses it will choose it. Why would there be any other distracting thoughts? In fact, only someone like Zhang Xiaohua, who had a pure mind and wholeheartedly focused on martial arts, would have such thoughts. She felt that this question was really stupid. However, if it was someone else, they would think that although this core internal strength cultivation method was amazing, if it couldn't be cultivated to Deshang, then how could it be called a divine art? It wouldn't bring any benefits to them. Even if they chose another core internal strength cultivation method, if they could cultivate it to Deshang, then their martial arts strength wouldn't be just a little bit stronger. Comparing the two, there would naturally be other considerations. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohu was just like Zhang Xiaohua. He only chose the most ideal and didn't want the most practical. He didn't hesitate and resolutely said, reporting to big sect leader, This disciple will choose this ethereal divine art. This disciple will definitely cultivate it to Deshang. Big sect leader, please wait and see. Peng smiled and said, Good. I'm really looking forward to it. Wan Wenhai also stood up from the side and said, Thank you, big sect leader, for your help. Peng waved his hand and said, Haha, can't we do it together? For more than a month, you've been hovering in front of me almost every day. Don't tell me I don't know what you're thinking. Forget it, let's hurry back. From tomorrow onwards, I'll teach him the incantation and let him cultivate it. Who knows, maybe one day that Yuan Xing will come looking for him to exchange pointers. We can't lose face. Hearing Peng's words, Zhang Xiaohu finally understood his master's painstaking efforts. His eyes became even more moist. -2. Chapter 200. Zhang Xiaohu's matter had come to an end. Peng ordered Wen Wenhai and Zhang Xiaohu to withdraw first. Only Zhang Xiaohua and the other three were left in the assembly hall. Zhang Xiaohua stood in front of the assembly hall, looking at the ground under her feet with apprehension. Her eyes kept darting around. She could feel Peng and that elder whose gazes were fixed on her. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't clear why sect leader had left her alone. If it was a simple reward, it shouldn't have anything to do with Zhang Xiaohu on the side. She also didn't know what sect leader O was up to. Zhang Xiaohua also didn't dare to ask. After a long while, when even Zhang Qingyue was somewhat puzzled, O Peng opened his mouth. He asked, Zhang Xiaohua, can you tell me where you learned the fist technique you used on the stage today when you were fighting with Sky Origin? Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly. She didn't expect O Peng to ask this question. She couldn't help but blush. Embarrassed, she told him about how she always forgot the moves of the fist technique and could only piece them together. When O Peng heard this, he still didn't believe her. He asked again, is what you said true? Didn't you get some secret fist technique book and learn it from it? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said sect leader O is wise. How could I have the chance to get a secret book? These were indeed learned from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency's fist technique books. I can't remember those moves clearly. I keep forgetting them. After learning them over and over again, I ended up with these 4 odd things. Wu Peng pondered for a moment and asked again, then how many moves does this fist technique of yours have? Can you show it to us from beginning to end? Zhang Xiaohua said, this fist technique has a total of 108 moves. Please wait a moment. I'll show it to you right away. The meeting hall was quite spacious. Zhang Qingyue helped to move some chairs back to make room for Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua stood there and took a deep breath. After calming herself down, she began to practice the Big Dipper mystical fist. O Peng and Huyuni's eyes lit up when they saw this, and they kept exchanging glances. Zhang Qingyue, on the other hand, was puzzled. The moves of this fist technique were very strange. They were very similar to the fist techniques that he had practiced before, but there were also some differences. Even the moves that he had never practiced before were different from what he remembered. He didn't know why gang leader was interested in this fist technique. After Zhang Xiaohua finished her demonstration, O Peng glanced at Huyuni again. He turned his head and asked, Zhang Xiaohua, your fist technique is pretty good. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was overjoyed. She probed, really? Leader, don't try to fool me. O Peng smiled and said, it's true. You used this fist technique to defeat Yuan Kong. So how can it not be good? However, let me ask you again. Why does your fist technique only have 108 moves? Why doesn't it have 360 moves? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this strange question, she scratched her head and said, Leader, I don't know. I've only learned so many moves, and I can even link them together. I don't think there's a place to put another move. When O Peng heard this, he couldn't help but say, that's strange. It should have 360 moves. Why do you only have 108 moves? Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled. She asked, Leader, why must it have 360 moves? I'm not lying to you. I really remember these 108 moves. At this moment, Huyuni said, Zhang Xiaohua, I want to ask you something. Our Misty School wants to record this fist technique of yours. What do you think? Record it? Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth in shock. She asked, what do you mean? Could it be that you want to draw it like a fist manual? Huyuni nodded. That's exactly what I mean. When Zhang Qingyue heard this, he was also shocked. What was a fist manual? It was a set of fist techniques that had been tempered thousands of times. When it reached a certain level and could be imparted to others, it was drawn into a book. It could be said that every fist manual was the result of countless people's painstaking research. However, Zhang Xiaohua's messy fist technique actually wanted to be recorded into a fist manual. Zhang Qingyue really couldn't see the value of this fist technique. Zhang Xiaohua was also shocked. She asked, Elder Hu, do you mean to use this fist manual to impart to the Misty School's disciples? Huyuni shook his head. No, Zhang Xiaohua. Leader and I just think that your fist technique is very interesting. Every move is different from ordinary moves, and these moves can be perfectly linked together. There's no need to talk about the fist technique's power. It's not inferior to the Dahlin Temple's Skanda exorcism palm, so we're very curious and want to record it. Oh, I see. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little disappointed. He really thought that the Misty School wanted to impart this set of Big Dipper mystical fists to their disciples, so he felt a little proud. However, Huyuni's explanation was more reasonable. The Misty School had many inheritances, so why would they be interested in Zhang Xiaohua's Wild Fox Zen fist technique? Zhang Qingyue also accepted this explanation. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. All right, no problem. Elder Hu, you can get someone to look for me whenever you want. I don't know how this fist manual is drawn, so just get them to tell me. Huyuni was overjoyed when he heard this. All right, it's settled then. I'll get someone to discuss this with you later. Zhang Xiaohua asked again. However, Elder Hu, I still have a request. Huyuni was taken aback. He asked, what request? Tell me. Zhang Xiaohua said, what are you going to name this fist manual? Huyuni turned to look at Openg and said, I haven't thought about it yet. Perhaps it will be called the De Zhou Stellar Fist. De Zhou Stellar Fist? Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. What kind of name is that? It sounds very awkward. I've already given it a name, so don't infringe on my copyright. Huyuni and the others opened their mouths wide and said, we don't mean to infringe on your copyright. Just tell us the name of this fist technique. Big Dipper Mystical Fist. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly. Openg thought for a moment and said, all right, let's call it the Big Dipper Mystical Fist. However, in order to not infringe on your legal rights, should we write Zhang Xiaohua's work on the fist manual? Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment. She waved her hand and said, forget it. It's better not to write it. Superior to others. The wise don't show their true colors. If I write it like that, others will know that it's mine. Won't I be annoyed to death? Then, Zhang Xiaohua said, that when the fist manual is finished, shouldn't you leave a copy for me? Openg was puzzled. You already know it, so why do you still want a fist manual? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and said, although I know this fist technique, I haven't written it yet. With this fist manual in hand, it can be said that my life hasn't been lived in vain. I've made my own contribution to the prosperity of the martial arts world. Every time I look at it, my heart feels happy. Openg smiled and said, no problem. When they finish, the first book will be yours. When the matter of the Big Dipper mystical fist came to an end, Openg said, Zhang Xiaohua, your performance in the arena today was really beyond our expectations. You actually defeated 2 experts from the Dahlin Temple. Most importantly, you won back our Misty School's face and didn't let us lose all the matches. Just because of this, I want to reward you today. Tell me, what do you want? Ah, there's a reward? Zhang Xiaohua blurted out and said, didn't you say that wild cards don't get rewards? Oh, Peng disagreed and said, rules are dead but people are alive. You've done so much to defeat 2 young monks. Your second brother's match was a draw, so I gave him a reward. There's no reason not to give you a reward. Tell me, what do you want? When Zhang Xiaohua heard He Tianqu's analysis, she already knew that Openg would reward her for inviting her here, but she didn't expect that she would be the one to say it. This time she was stunned. Sword manual? Saber manual? Internal strength, cultivation method? She seemed to be asking for too much. Perhaps she wanted Openg to accept her as a disciple of the Misty School? Zhang Xiaohua's heart felt a little better, but then she thought about it. She had risked her life to save his sister previously, which gave her a chance to be his disciple. This time, she had only defeated 2 monks. Her contribution was probably not that high. If she were to ask to be his disciple, wouldn't it put Openg in a difficult position? Besides, he had already said that he wanted something. It wasn't like the previous time where she just agreed to his request. Zhang Xiaohua was very clear about the difference between the two. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua immediately rejected her wish to be his disciple. Internal strength, cultivation method? Didn't she already have the Carefree Heart Sutra? Although her progress was extremely slow, she could still cultivate it. Qigong movement technique? She had just comprehended ethereal steps levitation technique. She would think about it after she mastered it. Did she have to choose a sword manual or saber manual? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was hesitating, an idea suddenly flashed in her mind. She said, "Sect Master, I thought of something. I wonder if you're willing to give it to me?" Peng was taken aback. He said, "If you don't tell me, how would I know what it is? What's there to talk about whether I'm willing or not?" Zhang Xiaohua explained, "During the martial arts exhibition, I went to the medicine hall. I really like that place. Furthermore, I really want to take a look at their collection of books. I wish to ask Sect Master for a token to allow me to freely enter and exit the medicine hall. I can also view their collection of books. What do you think?" Peng thought for a moment and said, "You little rascal, are you still thinking about those medicinal herbs that won't germinate? It's also hard on you for your painstaking efforts. It's not wrong for Yenner to treat you differently. And all right, I'll give you the token that you want. If you can solve the problem of the medicinal herbs not germinating, I'll definitely reward you well again. Cheng Yue, I'll leave this matter to you." Zhang Chengyue nodded in agreement. Following that, Peng asked again, "Zhang Xiaohua, I see that your ethereal steps seems to be pretty good. Have you finished learning it?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Sect Master, it's all because of Captain He's teachings. Under Captain He's earnest guidance, I can achieve what I have today." Peng was stunned. This fellow's polite words were all over the place. "Please collect, please tip, thank you. -2. Chapter 201. Seeing Peng's astonishment, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly added, "That's right, I haven't thanked Big Gang Master for his generosity. If not for your reward, I reckon I would have been kicked off the stage by that Yuan Kong the moment I stepped onto the stage. It's still Big Gang Master who is brilliant. He had long thought of today's competition and bestowed ethereal steps to me." Peng helplessly scolded with a smile. "Your flattery is too obvious. Don't do this next time or I'll vomit." Zhang Xiaohua also put on a stunned expression and said, "Sect Master can tell? That's amazing. However, vomit and vomit. I'm sure you'll get used to it." Peng shook his head and stopped talking about her. After a while, he said, "I see that you and He Tianshu have a certain level of talent in terms of footwork. To be able to reach the 3rd level in a month is also commendable. However, ethereal steps is one of the divine skills of the Misty School. I can't casually give you any of the cultivation techniques in the future." When Zhang Xiaohua heard that, she cursed in her heart. Why didn't she think of ethereal steps just now? Could it be that Sect Master wanted to give her the cultivation techniques in the future? However, she had already finished speaking, and the token was in her hands. How could she go back on her words? Zhang Xiaohua suppressed her feelings of regret and said helplessly, "Sect Master thinks too highly of us. I haven't even gotten a glimpse of the 3rd level of Qigong." When Peng heard that, he wasn't surprised and said, "The Qigong technique recorded in the 3rd level is very mysterious. If you were to comprehend it now, I would find it strange. Don't be anxious and cultivate slowly. Once you've cultivated your inner force, you'll naturally have some insights." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "It's not just the Qigong technique. I don't even understand the levitation technique." "Levitation technique?" Peng was stunned and asked, "What levitation technique?" "The ethereal steps he gave you recorded the levitation technique?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded in confusion and said, "That's right. The ethereal steps that Sect Master Zhang gave us recorded the levitation technique." Peng looked at Zhang Chengyue. Zhang Chengyue was also puzzled as he said, "Grand Gang Leader, I didn't know that the 3rd level of ethereal steps recorded the art of levitation. The ethereal steps that I practice is only a body lightning technique. Furthermore, due to the lack of time, this disciple casually found an ethereal steps manual from the library and took out the first 3 levels. I didn't read it myself." Peng nodded without any intention of blaming him and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, our Misty Sect's ethereal steps does indeed have the levitation technique. However, that was thousands of years ago, and no one has mastered the levitation technique for countless years. Therefore, when we impart and transcribe the ethereal steps, we have neglected this levitation technique. I reckon that what Qingyu gave you is a fake copy from a long time ago. Since you have read it, there is no need to practice it. Just focus on reading the levitation technique. In addition, when you return, immediately destroy the levitation technique's pages. Forget it. Is the ethereal steps technique with you, or with He Tianshu? Zhang Xiaohua said, It's with team leader He. Peng turned to Zhang Qingyue and said, Qingyue, this matter is your fault, so I won't nag at you. Go to the medicine hall now and retrieve the levitation technique. Also, tell He Tianshu not to speak of this matter to anyone else. Zhang Qingyue nodded and immediately left the meeting hall. Peng then said to Zhang Xiaohua, regarding the levitation technique, you also keep it to yourself. Don't speak of it to anyone else. Zhang Xiaohua's heart trembled as he thought to himself, Good boy, it's a good thing that I didn't say that I knew a little levitation technique just now. Otherwise, tomorrow would be the anniversary of my death. Why does this thing of silencing people always happen to me? He didn't know if Zhang Xiaohua was frightened by monk Changgang. The words silencing people often appeared in his mind. If he were to speak of the levitation technique, how could they silence him? They might even worship him like a deity. Zhang Xiaohua probed Peng's tone. Sect master, I heard from team leader He that the levitation technique is a legend. How did our ethereal steps record such a thing? Peng shook his head with a smile and said He Tianshu is right. The reason why the levitation technique is recorded in the ethereal steps is a secret of the Misty School. I can't tell you. Don't ask about it and forget about it. Zhang Xiaohua saw that Peng wasn't too concerned and thought to herself, I have already learned the levitation technique. It's impossible for me to forget it. Seeing sect master like this, I don't think it's anything life-threatening. I'll use it when there's no one around. I believe sect master won't be able to see it. Peng naturally didn't know what Zhang Xiaohua was thinking. He glanced at Huyuni before turning to Zhang Xiaohua and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I'll get Qingyu to send you the token you won in a few days. There's nothing else here. You can go back first. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she bowed and was about to leave when she suddenly thought of something. She asked, Peng, sect master, I have something that I don't know if I should say. Peng said, Here it comes again. Say it. Zhang Xiaohua said, That. Zhang Xiaohua stuttered for a long time but didn't say anything. Peng became impatient and said, Hurry up and say it. What is it? Zhang Xiaohua gritted her teeth and said, Sect master, you saw that I won face for our Misty School in the arena today. I also contributed my Fist of the North Star. I only talked about the copyright, but I didn't talk about the royalties. Do you think? As she said that, she rubbed her thumb and index finger together. Peng was puzzled at first, but after thinking for a while, he realized something and laughed loudly. Huyuni also had a face full of smiles. Peng said, Zhang Xiaohua, I forgot about that. All right, you did make a great contribution to the Misty School today. How about I reward you with 10,000 taels of gold? 10,000 taels of gold. Zhang Xiaohua's eyeballs almost fell out. Peng frowned and said, Why? You think it's too little? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly waved her hand and said, No. Sect master, I thought it would be enough if you gave me 100 taels of silver. Peng didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Just give me a big sum. 100 taels of silver is too little. Zhang Xiaohua was on the verge of tears. She didn't know the concept of 10,000 taels of gold. She had never seen gold before. She only knew that gold was much more valuable than silver. 10,000 taels of silver was something she couldn't even dream of, let alone 10,000 taels of gold. However, this 10,000 taels of gold was too hot. She didn't want to be killed by sect master the moment she turned around. This. Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss for words again. Huyuni smiled and said, Junior brother, don't scare Zhang Xiaohua. Just give her some money. 10,000 taels of gold will harm her. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she nodded her head like a chick pecking at rice. When Openg saw this, he laughed out loud and said, "All right, Zhang Xiaohua, don't be afraid. Although our Misty School isn't a super sect, we still have money. Should I give you 10,000 taels of silver?" Zhang Xiaohua shook her head again and said, 100 taels is enough. I've been out for so long and haven't given my family any money. 100 taels is enough. In my impression, my family spends 5 taels of silver a year. When Openg and Huyuni heard this, they were slightly moved and secretly nodded their heads. Openg thought for a moment and said, "Right. How about this? I'll give you 1,000 taels of silver. Go back and show filial piety to your parents. They didn't raise you in vain." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was overjoyed and said, "Thank you, sect master." Openg smiled and waved his hand, indicating for her to leave. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and walked a few steps before stopping and saying, "Sect master, I still have something to tell you. I don't know if I should say it." Openg was so angry that his nose was about to become crooked. He endured and said, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. Then say it quickly." Zhang Xiaohua said, "I've been away from home for more than a year. I want to go back. Is that okay?" Openg said curiously, "You're not a disciple of our Misty School. You don't need to tell me that you don't want to go back home." Zhang Xiaohua said, "But I want to go back with my second brother. We came out together. If we don't go back together, my parents will be worried to death." Openg casually said, "All right, no problem. Go see your second brother and tell him that I agree." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. "Thank you for your help, sect master." After saying that, she turned around and walked away. But after taking a few steps, she felt that something was wrong and couldn't help but turn around. Sure enough, Openg and Huyuni were staring at her back. Zhang Xiaohua turned to look behind her and didn't see anything. She asked sect master, "Elder Hu, why are you staring at my back?" Openg smiled and said, "We're waiting to see you turn around." "All right, is there anything else?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said no. Openg was still worried. He asked, "Is there really nothing else?" "Yes," Zhang Xiaohua said resolutely. Openg said, "All right, then you can leave." Only then did Zhang Xiaohua turn around again and quickly walk out of the assembly hall. But after taking a few steps, she suddenly heard Openg call out from behind her, "Wait." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She stopped in her tracks and turned around to ask, "Sect master, what do you want this time?" Openg said fiercely, "I don't want this time. There's only one thing." Zhang Xiaohua spread her hands and said, "Please speak." Openg said, "Although I've agreed to let you and your second brother go home, you can only leave after you've finished recording the fist manual and your second brother has memorized the first layer of the inner strength cultivation method. Do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua felt strange and said, "Sect master, that's what I was thinking. Even if you didn't say it, I would still do it. Being able to record a book is also a very honorable thing for me." Openg was speechless. He waved his hand and motioned for her to leave. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't move. She asked again, "Sect master, are you really okay?" "Really. Hurry up and leave. Don't delay, and go back for supper." Openg weakly replied. Zhang Xiaohua said, "Then I'm really leaving." Openg said loudly, "Oh, if you don't go, I won't let you go." -2.